She walked into that ballroom thinking she'd already won. The mistress wore diamonds he'd bought with his wife's money, smiled at guests who would soon watch her fall, and never saw the trap closing around her. Because while Lila Monroe was playing dress-up in another woman's life, Victoria Hale was playing chess. And tonight, the queen would take everything. If you want to see how a woman destroys her enemies without raising her voice, stick around until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The February wind cut through Manhattan like a blade, but inside the crystal ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, everything burned with artificial warmth. Champagne flowed. Diamonds caught the light from 3 massive chandeliers. Women in gowns that cost more than most people's cars laughed behind their hands, and men in $1,000 suits made deals that would ruin lives by morning. Adrian Cole stood near the bar, and he looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd mistaken money for power and conquest for achievement. He was 43 but fought aging like it was a personal insult. His hair, suspiciously dark for a man his age, was slicked back with too much product. His suit was custom-made, perfectly tailored to hide the softness creeping into his midsection, despite 3 personal trainers. His watch cost $80,000. His cufflinks were platinum. Everything about him screamed success, which is usually what people do when they're not quite sure they've achieved it. And on his arm, like a trophy he couldn't stop polishing, was Lila Monroe. She was 28, though she told people she was 25. Her dress was red. Not burgundy, not crimson, but that specific shade of red that demands attention and refuses to apologize for it. It was cut low enough to make older women purse their lips and high enough to make their husbands look twice. Her blonde hair fell in waves that had taken her stylist 3 hours to create, but were supposed to look effortless. Her makeup was perfect. Her smile was practiced. She looked like she'd won something. "Adrian, darling," she purred, her fingers trailing down his lapel in a gesture that was supposed to look affectionate but came across as possessive. Senator Morrison is staring again. "Should we go say hello?" Adrian barely glanced at the senator. Let him stare. He's nobody. He's a senator. He's a senator from Connecticut. That's like being the smartest kid in summer school. Adrian plucked 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter without thanking him. "Here, try to look like you belong." The words landed like a slap, but Lila's smile never faltered. She'd gotten good at swallowing small humiliations, convincing herself they were temporary inconveniences on the road to something better. In 6 months, she'd be his wife. In 6 months, she'd be the one wearing the real jewels instead of the ones he bought on credit to keep her happy. In 6 months, she wouldn't have to smile through his casual cruelty, or so she believed. "Everyone's talking about us," Lila said, leaning closer. She smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. "Did you see Caroline Ashworth's face when we walked in? I thought she was going to choke on her champagne." "What's so important?" Caroline Ashworth is irrelevant. She's on the board of the Metropolitan Opera. Which is why she's irrelevant. Adrian scanned the room with the expression of a man who owned everything he saw and was still somehow disappointed. Half these people are has-beens clinging to old money and older names. The other half are climbers who'll be bankrupt in 5 years. Then why are we here? Because appearances matter. Because my investors need to see me at events like this. Because... He stopped mid-sentence, his jaw tightening. Because some battles you win by showing up. Lila followed his gaze and saw nothing particularly interesting. Just more rich people doing rich people things. But Adrian's hand had gone tight around his glass, his knuckles white. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." His voice was clipped. Absolutely nothing. Which meant, of course, that everything was wrong. Across the room, Victoria Hale's name was being whispered like an incantation. "Have you heard? 6 months now. Not a single public appearance. Some people are saying she's had a breakdown." "Wouldn't you? If your husband flaunted his mistress like that. Dignity, I suppose, staying quiet, or maybe she's just given up." The whispers were exactly what Victoria had designed them to be. Speculation, pity, a narrative that painted her as a tragic figure, a woman too wounded to fight back. It was perfect, because nobody sees the knife coming from someone they've already counted out. Lila heard the whispers too, and they made her bold. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, let her hand slide possessively around Adrian's waist. Let them talk. Let them see. She was the woman who'd won Adrian Cole, and soon enough, everyone would know it. I don't understand why she even gets to keep his name, Lila said, her voice carrying just enough to reach the group of women nearby. If I were her, I'd at least have the dignity to disappear completely. Lila! Adrian's warning came too late. The women nearby had heard. Their expressions ranged from shock to barely concealed amusement. One of them, a silver-haired woman in emerald silk, actually smiled. My dear, the woman said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that only old money can truly achieve. Victoria Hale is the Cole name. Adrian married into it. The correction landed like a bomb. Lila's smile froze. The Cole of Fortune, the Cole Properties, the Cole Foundation, all of it was Victoria's family legacy. Adrian was a mid-level real estate agent when they met. The woman paused, letting that sink in. Surely you knew that? Of course I knew that. Lila's voice climbed half an octave. I just meant that you don't understand how these things work. Yes, dear. We gathered. The women drifted away, leaving Lila's face burning. Adrian drained his champagne in one swallow. I told you to be careful what you say here. You told me she was nothing. You told me she'd signed the divorce papers. Keep your voice down. Why? Everyone already knows. You've been living in that penthouse with me for 6 months. You parade me around like I'm... Like you're what, Lila? Adrian's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Like you're my girlfriend, because that's what you are. My girlfriend. Not my wife. Not my partner. My girlfriend. And if you can't handle being in rooms like this without embarrassing me, maybe you should wait in the car. The words hung between them like poison. Lila's eyes went glassy, but she was too well trained to cry, too invested to walk away. She'd gambled everything on this man, her job, her reputation, her self-respect. She'd become the other woman, absorbed the judgment, endured the whispers, all because he'd promised her something better. He'd promised her everything Victoria had. I'm sorry, she whispered. You're right. I'll be more careful. Adrian didn't even acknowledge the apology. He was already looking past her, his attention caught by something across the room. The crowd had shifted, the energy in the ballroom had changed, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. And then the whispers started again. But different this time. Is that... It can't be. I heard she was in Europe. My God, who is that with her? The crowd parted like water, and Victoria Hale walked in. She didn't make an entrance. She didn't need to. The room rearranged itself around her like gravity had shifted. She was 41, and she wore it like armor. No desperate attempts to look younger, no apologies for aging. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that was severe and elegant at once. Her dress was black, not the safe black of women who want to blend in, but the deliberate black of women who understand that power doesn't need decoration. No excessive jewelry, no desperate cleavage, just clean lines and absolute confidence. But it was the man beside her that made the room go silent. Dante Moretti. Everyone knew who he was, even if they pretended not to. His family name appeared in FBI reports and tabloid headlines with equal frequency. His business empire existed in the gray spaces where legal and illegal shook hands and made deals. He was dangerous in the way that makes powerful men nervous and careful, and he was treating Victoria Hale like she was the only person in the room. Holy shit, someone whispered behind Adrian. Lila grabbed his arm. Who is that man? Adrian didn't answer. He couldn't. His face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. Because he'd spent 6 months telling himself that Victoria was defeated. 6 months convincing himself she'd accepted the situation. 6 months believing his own lies. And now she was here, looking like a queen who'd just remembered she had an army. Victoria moved through the crowd with the easy grace of someone who'd been in rooms like this her entire life. People stepped aside. Hands reached out to greet her. The same people who'd been whispering about her minutes ago now competed for her attention. Victoria, darling, it's been too long since... You look absolutely stunning. We've missed you at the foundation meetings. She smiled at each of them, warm but not desperate, present but not performing. And Dante stayed at her side, his presence a silent declaration that made every man in the room recalculate their assumptions. Lila's grip on Adrian's arm had gone white-knuckled. Do something. What exactly would you like me to do, Lila? She brought a date. To embarrass you, to make a scene. You can't just let her... Let her what? Attend an event she's been invited to? Bring a guest? Exist in public? Adrian's laugh was brittle. By all means, please tell me what I'm supposed to do about my wife attending a charity gala. The word landed like he'd meant it to. Wife, not ex-wife, not separated spouse. Wife. Lila's face went through several emotions too quickly to name. You said the divorce was almost final. I said the papers were drawn up. You said it was just a matter of time, It is. But Adrian's voice had lost its certainty. Victoria was moving toward them now, not rushing, not making a show of it, just naturally. Inevitably, the way rivers flow downhill. The crowd sensed blood in the water. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People turned to watch. Someone actually pulled out their phone. And Lila, who'd spent 6 months playing the role of the woman who'd won, suddenly understood she'd been cast in the wrong story entirely. Adrian? She hissed. Say something. Go to her. Stop this before what? Victoria's voice cut through the noise, cultured and calm. Before I say hello to my husband at a public event? She'd reached them. Up close, the difference between Victoria and Lila was devastating. Not in beauty. Lila was objectively beautiful in the way that personal trainers and cosmetic procedures could achieve. But Victoria had something Lila would never have, no matter how much money she spent. She had gravity, presence, the kind of power that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't have to. Victoria. Adrian's voice was careful. I didn't expect to see you here. Clearly. Her eyes moved to Lila with the casual interest someone might show a new piece of furniture. You must be Lila Monroe. I've heard so much about you. Lila's training kicked in. She extended her hand, her smile bright and false. Mrs. Cole. What a surprise. Is it? Victoria didn't take the offered hand. Adrian's been living in my penthouse with you for 6 months. I'd assumed at some point we'd be formally introduced. The casual mention of ownership, my penthouse, made Adrian flinch. Lila's hand dropped. I'm sure this is awkward for you. Is it? I'm not sure I'd characterize it that way. Victoria tilted her head slightly, a gesture that seemed curious but was actually calculating. How would you characterize it, Adrian? Awkward? Uncomfortable? Predictable? Victoria, this isn't the time or place. For what? Civility? I'm being perfectly civil. She turned to Dante, who'd been watching the exchange with the amused expression of someone enjoying a very good show. Darling, this is my husband, Adrian Cole, and his companion, Lila Monroe. Adrian, Lila, this is Dante Moretti. Dante extended his hand to Adrian with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A pleasure. Adrian's handshake was weak, defeated. He knew exactly who Dante Moretti was and what it meant that Victoria had brought him here. Lila tried next, practically thrusting her hand at Dante like a weapon. Mr. Moretti, I've heard so much about your business interests. I'm sure you have. Dante's handshake with her was perfunctory, already dismissing her. Though I suspect most of what you've heard is speculation and bad journalism. I'm sure it is. Lila's laugh was too loud, too nervous. She was floundering, sensing the power dynamics, but not understanding them, like someone drowning who thinks they're just treading water. The crowd had stopped pretending not to watch. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for since Adrian had started showing up with Lila, the confrontation, the scene, the drama. But Victoria wasn't giving them a scene. She was giving them something much worse. I hope you're both enjoying the gala, Victoria said pleasantly. The foundation worked so hard on the arrangements this year. The foundation, Adrian repeated. Your foundation. Our foundation, technically, though I've been handling the operation since you've been occupied. She smiled at Lila. That dress is lovely, by the way. Is it vintage? The question seemed innocent. It wasn't. Lila preened, missing the trap. It's brand new, actually. Adrian bought it for me last week. How generous. Adrian, did you use the Amex or the Visa? Adrian's jaw tightened. Victoria, I'm just curious about the accounting. The Amex has that wonderful rewards program, and I'd hate for you to miss out on points. She turned to Dante. My husband is terrible with money. Always has been. I handle all our finances. Our finances. Not his and hers. Ours. The reminder was surgical. Lila's smile had frozen into something grotesque. I'm sure that arrangement works well for you both. It does. Adrian makes excellent decorating choices. Victoria's eyes moved between them with calculated precision. Speaking of which, how are you finding the penthouse? Is the morning light still too bright in the bedroom? I always meant to get better curtains. The casual knowledge of intimate details, the bedroom, the light, the flaws Lila thought were hers to complain about, made Lila's face go pale. It's fine, Lila managed. Everything is fine. I'm so glad. I've been meaning to reclaim some of my things from there. Nothing urgent, just some personal items. Maybe next week? Would Tuesday work? Or is Tuesday when Adrian takes you to Maury's for dinner? The mention of their Tuesday dinner ritual, something Lila had thought was special, spontaneous, theirs, made her physically step backward. How did you... Please. Adrian's been taking women to Maury's every Tuesday for 15 years. It's practically a standing reservation. Victoria's smile was warm and devastating. They know his wine order before he sits down. Adrian had gone completely still, his face a mask of controlled fury. You're making a scene. Am I? I thought I was making conversation. Victoria glanced around at the watching crowd with mild surprise. Is everyone staring? I hadn't noticed. She had, of course. She'd orchestrated every second of this. Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more private, Dante suggested, though his tone made it clear he was enjoying himself immensely. That's very thoughtful, but I think we're done here. Victoria turned to Adrian with the expression of someone concluding a business meeting. I just wanted to say hello before the evening got too busy. I'm sure we'll see each other again soon. Victoria. Adrian's voice was tight. We need to talk. Do we? About what? About this. About whatever game you think you're playing. Game? Victoria looked genuinely puzzled. I'm attending a charity gala with a friend. You're attending a charity gala with your girlfriend. Where's the game? You know exactly what you're doing. Do I? Please, Adrian, enlighten me. What am I doing? She waited, her expression pleasant and expectant. Adrian opened his mouth, closed it. He'd walked into her trap and realized it too late, because she hadn't done anything wrong. She'd been polite, civil, even friendly. She'd made no accusations, thrown no drinks, caused no scene. She'd simply existed in the same space as him and his mistress, and somehow that was worse than any confrontation could have been. She'd made them look small. Lila tugged at Adrian's sleeve. Let's just go. Let's get out of here. And abandon a $2,000 a plate dinner? Victoria's eyebrows raised. That seems wasteful, unless... Oh, Adrian, please tell me you bought tickets. You did buy tickets, didn't you? His silence was answer enough. Victoria's laugh was soft, almost sympathetic. You're here as someone's guest. Of course you are. She glanced at Dante. Darling, didn't we donate an entire table tonight? 2 tables, Dante corrected. You insisted. I did, didn't I? Victoria smiled at Adrian and Lila. Well, enjoy dinner, wherever you end up sitting. I'm sure the foundation appreciates your, attendance. She turned to leave, Dante already moving with her, and Adrian finally found his voice. This isn't over, Victoria. She paused, looked back at him with an expression that might have been pity or might have been triumph. It was impossible to tell. No, she agreed quietly. It's not. Then she was gone, absorbed back into the crowd that seemed to gravitate toward her like she was the sun, and they were helpless planets. Lila was shaking, actually trembling, her champagne glass rattling in her hand. Adrian, what just happened? Nothing happened. She humiliated us. She came over here with that criminal, and she humiliated us in front of everyone. She said hello, Lila. She was perfectly polite. Polite? Lila's voice cracked. She basically called me furniture. She talked about curtains and light, and God, everyone was staring, everyone was watching, everyone knows. Knows what? That I have a wife and a girlfriend? They already knew that. You wanted them to know that. You wanted to be seen with me. Adrian drained another champagne flute. Congratulations, you've been seen. Why didn't you defend me? Defend you from what? She didn't say anything untrue. She made me look like an idiot. You didn't need her help with that. The words hung in the air like poison. Lila stared at him, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. Tears welled up in her eyes. Real ones this time, not the strategic tears she'd learned to deploy for sympathy or sex. How can you say that to me? Because it's true. Because you walked into a situation you don't understand and expected to win based on what? A nice dress and a pretty face? Adrian's anger was cold, controlled, vicious. You think you're special, Lila? You think you're the first woman I've brought to events like this? You're not. You're just the first one stupid enough to believe it means something. Each word was a knife, surgical and precise. Lila's tears spilled over, ruining the makeup that had taken an hour to apply. You told me you loved me. I tell a lot of people a lot of things. You said we'd get married. You said when the divorce was final. The divorce will never be final, Lila. Not on my terms. Not in any way that gives me what I actually want. He was past caring who heard him now. Victoria owns everything. The properties, the money, the connections, the name, all of it. I'm Mr. Victoria Hale playing dress-up in a suit she paid for. And you? You're a distraction I keep around because it pisses her off. That's not true. Isn't it? Then explain to me what just happened. Explain why she walked in here with Dante fucking Moretti looking like she owns the world. Explain why every person in this room who was whispering about her 5 minutes ago is now treating her like royalty. Because they're afraid of him. No, because they respect her. Because she's real and you're... He trailed off, looking at her with something that might have been pity if it weren't so close to disgust. You're whatever this is. Lila slapped him. Not hard, not dramatically, just a quick, sharp contact that made his head turn and left a red mark on his cheek. The crowd gasped. Phones came out. Someone definitely started recording. And Adrian smiled. It was the worst thing he could have done. Feel better? He asked quietly. Lila was already backing away, horror dawning on her face as she realized what she'd done, what it would look like, how it would play in the court of public opinion. She'd just made herself the villain in a room full of witnesses. Adrian, I didn't mean... Save it. He touched his cheek, checking for blood that wasn't there. We're done. Lose my number, pack your shit, and get out of my penthouse by Monday. Your penthouse? You just said it's hers. Exactly. Which means I can't kick you out tonight, but I can make sure you're gone before she decides to reclaim it. He straightened his tie, already composing himself. Consider this your notice. You can't do this. You can't just... I can do whatever I want, Lila. That's what you never understood. None of this was ever about you. It was about her. It was about making her pay attention, making her react, making her see that I could replace her. His laugh was hollow. Except you can't replace someone who was never actually yours to lose. He walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the ballroom, mascara running, dress suddenly too bright. The center of attention in exactly the way she'd wanted, but for all the wrong reasons. People were whispering again. But not about Victoria this time. Across the room, Victoria watched the whole thing unfold with the calm expression of someone observing a chess game they'd already won. Dante leaned close, his lips nearly touching her ear. That was brutal. That was necessary. Victoria accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter. She needed to understand what she'd walked into. And Adrian needed to remember that some doors, once closed, don't open again. She took a small sip, her eyes never leaving her husband's retreating form. He spent 6 months pretending he held the cards. Tonight he learned who's actually been playing. What's next? Victoria's smile was small and private and absolutely merciless. Everything else. The gala continued around them. Dinner, dancing, the carefully orchestrated charity auction that would raise millions for causes most attendees didn't actually care about. But the real event had already happened. The power had shifted, the pieces had been moved, and everyone in that room knew it. By midnight, Lila would be a trending topic on society blogs and gossip sites. By morning, her name would be synonymous with exactly the kind of woman you didn't want to be caught being. The girl who'd thought sleeping with a married man made her powerful, who'd believed expensive dresses could buy her respect, who'd slapped someone in public and cemented her own social death. By next week, she'd be unemployable in any industry that mattered, unhireable by any company that cared about optics. Her friends, the ones who'd existed as long as she was useful or entertaining, would quietly stop returning her calls. She'd fade into obscurity like every other mistress who'd forgotten the first rule of playing in rooms like this: know who actually has power and never, ever challenge them publicly. But that was Lila's problem now. Victoria had bigger plans. She'd spent 6 months being invisible, 6 months letting people assume she was weak, defeated, pathetic. 6 months allowing her husband to parade his mediocre conquest around like a trophy while she worked in silence. She'd been rebuilding, restructuring, preparing, and tonight was just the opening move. Dante's hand found the small of her back, a gesture that looked protective but felt like partnership. Your husband is staring at us. Let him. He looks like he's considering violence. Adrian's too much of a coward for violence. He'll drink too much, make a scene, embarrass himself further, and wake up tomorrow with a hangover and a phone full of lawyers telling him how badly he's fucked up. Victoria turned to face Dante fully, her expression softening into something that almost looked like affection. Thank you for tonight. For what? Being your accessory? For being exactly what I needed you to be. And what's that? A reminder that I have options, that I'm not some abandoned wife waiting for scraps. She paused. That I never needed him in the first place. Dante's smile was warm and genuine. You know, when you called me 3 months ago, I thought you'd lost your mind. Did you? Victoria Hale, society darling, calling Dante Moretti for help? It seemed unlikely at best. My father did business with your family for years. Why wouldn't I call? Because most people in your world pretend people in my world don't exist. We're useful in the shadows, but embarrassing in the light. He glanced around the ballroom pointedly. Yet, here we are? Here we are, she agreed, shocking everyone. Is that all this is? Theater? Victoria considered the question carefully. Their arrangement had started as exactly that. A calculated move, a strategic alliance designed to make Adrian sweat. But somewhere in the past 3 months, between late-night phone calls and longer dinners, it had become something else, something neither of them had quite named yet. I don't know, she admitted. Ask me again in 6 months. I will. The promise hung between them, comfortable and complicated at once. Across the room, Adrian was on his third drink and getting sloppy. His tie was askew. His voice was too loud. He was talking to Theodore Marsh, a real estate competitor who'd been circling Adrian's weaker properties like a shark for months. Victoria watched with clinical interest. He's making deals he'll regret, Dante observed. He's making deals he doesn't have the authority to make. Victoria's smile was sharp. By Monday morning, his lawyers will inform him that he can't sell, lease, or leverage any property currently held in both our names without my explicit consent, which, of course, I won't give. You've been planning this for a while. Since the day he moved Lila into my penthouse, and thought I wouldn't notice. Victoria's voice was calm, factual. Men like Adrian think women like me are decorative. They think we smile at charity events and sign whatever papers they put in front of us and don't notice when they're stealing from us. But you noticed. I've noticed everything. Every shell company, every hidden account, every property he's tried to put in his name only, every lie he's told, every promise he's broken, every dime he's spent on women who aren't his wife. She took another sip of champagne. I've been documenting it all. For leverage? For war. The word was so casual, so certain, that Dante actually laughed. Remind me never to cross you. You won't. You're too smart. Victoria turned to face him fully. You know what the difference is between men like you and men like Adrian? Tell me. You know you're dangerous. You own it, operate in it, build empires on it. Adrian thinks he's dangerous because he can afford expensive lawyers and buy his way out of consequences. He's never actually had to fight for anything in his life. And you have? I'm a woman in a world run by men like him. I've been fighting since I was born. Her voice was soft but absolute. The difference is, I learned to fight smart. Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he raised his champagne glass in a small toast. To fighting smart. Victoria clinked her glass against his, and winning decisively. They drank, and across the room, Adrian Cole watched his wife with growing dread, finally beginning to understand that he'd made a catastrophic mistake. He'd assumed Victoria would be easy to defeat because she'd been easy to ignore. But she'd never been defeated. She'd been patient. And now, patience was over. The car ride back to Victoria's townhouse was quiet, in the way expensive cars are quiet. Leather seats absorbing sound, engine purring instead of roaring, the city passing by through tinted windows like a film reel. Dante had dismissed his driver and taken the wheel himself, which told Victoria more than words could. When men like Dante Moretti drove themselves, it meant the conversation was meant to stay private. "You're thinking too loud," he said, eyes on the road. Victoria was staring out the window, watching Manhattan slide past in streaks of light and shadow. "Am I?" "You've been silent for 10 blocks. That's not like you." "Maybe I'm enjoying the quiet. Maybe you're second-guessing what just happened." She turned to look at him. His profile was sharp in the intermittent streetlight. Roman nose, strong jaw, the kind of face that belonged on old coins or wanted posters. "Do you think I should be?" "I think you just declared war on a man who has lawyers on retainer and an ego the size of Manhattan. So yes, maybe a little healthy second-guessing wouldn't hurt. Adrian's lawyers work for him. My lawyers work for me. There's a difference." "Is there?" "His lawyers tell him what he wants to hear. Mine tell me the truth." Victoria settled back into her seat, finally relaxing slightly. "Besides, I'm not worried about Adrian. I'm worried about the mess he'll make when he realizes how badly he's lost. Men like him don't realize things like that. They just get louder." "Exactly my point." Dante smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he knew exactly what she meant. "So what's the play? He spirals, makes mistakes, and you document everything. Let him dig his own grave. Step in at precisely the right moment to bury him in it. Cold. Effective." They stopped at a red light, and for a moment the city sounds filtered in, distant sirens, someone's car stereo thumping bass, the eternal hum of New York refusing to sleep. Dante drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, a nervous tell Victoria had learned to recognize. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Dante. I'm just wondering if you actually need me for any of this, or if I'm just a very well-dressed prop in your revenge play." The vulnerability in the question surprised her. Dante Moretti didn't do vulnerability. He did power and certainty and the kind of casual violence that kept his empire running smoothly. But right now, sitting in a car worth more than most people's houses, he looked almost uncertain. "You're not a prop," Victoria said quietly. "Then what am I?" "I don't know yet. What do you want to be?" The light changed. Dante accelerated smoothly, buying himself time to think. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "That's a dangerous question." "Why?" "Because I might give you an answer you're not ready for." Victoria considered that, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit the picture she'd assembled. "Try me. Not tonight." He pulled up in front of her townhouse. 4 stories of pristine brownstone in the Upper East Side worth $8 million at last appraisal. "Tonight, you need to think about what happens next with Adrian. Tomorrow, we can talk about what happens next with us." "There's an us?" "You tell me, Victoria. You're the one who called me 3 months ago asking for help. You're the one who showed up at family dinners and charmed my mother. You're the one who made sure every photo from tonight shows us looking like more than just friends." He shifted the car into park, turned to face her fully. "So yes, I think there's an us. The question is what kind?" She should have had an answer ready. Victoria Hale always had answers ready. But sitting there in the quiet intimacy of the car, with Dante looking at her like she was a problem he actually wanted to solve instead of a conquest to achieve, the words wouldn't come. "I should go," she said instead. "You should." Neither of them moved. Thank you for tonight, Victoria tried again. You already thanked me. I'm thanking you again. Why? Because you didn't have to do this. Play my date, put up with my drama, stand there while my husband glared daggers at you all night. You could have said no. Dante laughed, short and genuine. Victoria, when you called me asking for a favor, I dropped a meeting with a state senator to take your call. When you asked me to escort you to a society gala, I cleared my entire evening. When you needed someone to make your husband understand he'd made a mistake, I put on my best suit and my most intimidating smile. He paused. At what point did you think I was doing this out of obligation? Then why are you doing it? Because 3 months ago, Victoria Hale called me out of the blue and said she needed help. And because I've been waiting for that call since the day I met you at your father's funeral, when you were the only person in that church who didn't look at me like I was contaminating the holy water. The memory came back sharp and clear. 5 years ago, street. Patrick's Cathedral packed with Manhattan's elite, all of them pretending they'd loved Harrison Hale when most of them had spent his last years trying to figure out how to profit from his death. And Dante Moretti, sitting in the back row where families like his always sat, close enough to pay respects, far enough to avoid offense. Victoria had been 26 and drowning in grief and family politics. She'd noticed him because he was the only person there who wasn't performing. Everyone else was doing grief theater, the right clothes, the right expressions, the right whispered condolences. Dante had just sat there, solid and real, and when their eyes met across the church, he'd nodded once. Not sympathy, not pity, just acknowledgement. She'd remembered that. Apparently, so had he. That was 5 years ago, Victoria said. Yes. You've been waiting 5 years for me to call? I've been waiting 5 years for you to realize you could. Dante's smile was soft, almost sad. Men like your husband, they see women like you as accessories. Beautiful, expensive, status-enhancing accessories. They never see the steel underneath until it cuts them. And you do? Victoria, I've seen you negotiate deals that would make corporate lawyers weep. I've watched you run circles around men twice your age with half your intelligence. I've seen you bury enemies so efficiently they don't even realize they're dead until the dirt hits their face. He reached over, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so casual and intimate it made her breath catch. So yes, I see the steel, and I'm not stupid enough to think it's decoration. She should have said something, should have had a clever response, a deflection, something to maintain the distance she'd been so careful to preserve. But the truth was, she was tired. Tired of performing, tired of armor, tired of being the woman everyone expected her to be instead of the woman she actually was. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted quietly. With Adrian? With any of this. I have a plan for destroying him, yes. I know exactly how to dismantle his life piece by piece until there's nothing left but debt and humiliation. But after that? She shook her head. I have no idea. You don't need to know yet. Don't I? I'm 41 years old, Dante. I spent 15 years married to a man who saw me as a bank account with good bone structure. I let him because it was easier than admitting I'd made a mistake. And now I'm sitting here with you, and I don't even know if this is real or just another performance. It's real. His voice was certain, absolute. At least for me it is. How do you know? Because if this was just a performance, I'd be home right now instead of sitting in a car having the most honest conversation I've had in months. He pulled back slightly, giving her space. Look, I'm not going to pressure you. Whatever this is, whatever it becomes, it happens on your timeline. But don't second guess what you felt in there tonight. And what did I feel? Powerful. Certain. Like you'd finally stopped apologizing for taking up space in your own life. His eyes held hers. That's not performance, Victoria. That's you remembering who you are. The words settled into her chest like stones finding the bottom of a lake. Heavy, grounding, true. I should really go, she said, but this time she meant it. Call me tomorrow? To talk about the us situation? To talk about whatever you want to talk about. Dante smiled. I'm a good listener when I'm not being intimidating. Victoria laughed despite herself, gathered her clutch, opened the door. The February air hit her face like a slap, bracing and real. She paused halfway out of the car, looked back. Dante? Yeah? Thank you for all of it, not just tonight. Any time, Victoria. Literally any time. She closed the door, walked up the steps to her townhouse, and didn't look back even though she wanted to. The door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time in 6 months, she felt like she could actually breathe. The townhouse was silent in the way only empty houses are, not peaceful, just absent. Every sound she made echoed slightly, her heels on the marble foyer, her clutch hitting the console table, her coat rustling as she hung it in the closet. She'd bought this place 3 years ago with her own money, her own name on the deed. Adrian hated it, called it cold and impersonal, which was exactly why she'd bought it. A space that was entirely hers, that he couldn't contaminate with his presence or his mistresses or his lies. The living room was all clean lines and expensive neutrals, cream sofas, walnut tables, abstract art that cost more than most cars. The kind of room that appeared in architectural magazines with captions like modern elegance or sophisticated minimalism. It looked like nobody lived there, because nobody did. Not really. Victoria poured herself 2 fingers of scotch from the bar cart, Macallan 25, the expensive bottle she saved for nights that required it, and stood at the window overlooking the street. Dante's car was still there, idling. He was waiting to make sure she got inside safely, which was either chivalrous or controlling depending on your perspective. She decided it was chivalrous. The car pulled away eventually, taillights disappearing into Manhattan traffic, and Victoria was alone again with her scotch and her thoughts, and the victory that somehow felt more hollow than she'd expected. Her phone buzzed. A text from her lawyer, Marcus Chen, who apparently never slept. Saw the photos from tonight. Well played. Call me Monday. We need to discuss accelerating the timeline. Then another text, this one from her assistant, Patricia. You're trending on 6 different society blogs. Adrian is trending on 4. Lila is trending on 9, and none of them are kind. Do you need me to do damage control? Victoria typed back quickly. No damage control. Let it play out naturally. Understood. You were magnificent tonight, by the way. Thank you. Go to bed, Patricia. You first. Victoria smiled despite herself, set the phone down, and drank her scotch. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless performance. Lights and sirens and the constant hum of 8 million people all trying to get somewhere better than where they were. Her phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call. At midnight. From a number she recognized immediately, even though every instinct told her not to answer. Adrian. She let it ring 4 times, considering. Answering gave him what he wanted, her attention, her reaction, proof that he could still affect her. Not answering proved she'd moved on, that he was irrelevant now. Both options had merit. She answered on the 5th ring. Victoria. His voice was slurred, ugly with alcohol and anger. We need to talk. It's midnight, Adrian. I don't give a fuck what time it is. You humiliated me tonight. I said hello to you at a public event. If that humiliated you, perhaps you should examine your life choices. Don't play stupid. You know exactly what you did. She could hear background noise, music, voices, the ambient sound of a bar or club. He'd gone out after the gala, probably to drink himself into courage. Showing up with Dante Moretti? Are you out of your mind? I brought a date to a charity gala. You brought a date to a charity gala. I'm not seeing the problem. The problem is that you brought a fucking mobster. Dante runs several legitimate businesses and sits on the board of 3 charitable foundations. His family history is irrelevant. His family history is public record. His uncle went to prison for racketeering, and your uncle went to prison for tax evasion, but I've never held that against you. Victoria kept her voice calm, clinical. What do you actually want, Adrian? I want you to stop playing games. I'm not playing anything. I'm living my life. If that bothers you, I suggest you focus on your own. My own life? He laughed, bitter and mean. You mean the life you've been systematically destroying for 6 months? I haven't done anything to you. Bullshit. You've been poisoning my business relationships, turning my investors against me, making me look weak. I've been running the foundation and managing our joint assets. If your investors are concerned, perhaps it's because they've realized you don't actually control the money you've been spending. Silence on the other end. She'd landed a hit. The penthouse is in my name, Adrian said finally. The penthouse is in both our names, purchased with money from a trust my father established before we were married. You have no unilateral claim to it. I've been living there. With your mistress. Yes, I'm aware. In fact, my lawyer is very aware, as is the trustee of my father's estate, as is the IRS, who I understand has some questions about certain deductions you've claimed. You're bluffing. Am I? Would you like to bet your financial future on that? More silence. Longer this time. She could practically hear him recalculating, trying to figure out what she knew and what she was guessing and what was just strategic theater. Victoria. His voice changed, softened, shifted into the tone he used when he wanted something. Baby, please. Can we just talk about this like adults? The casual intimacy of baby, after everything he'd done, made her stomach turn. We are talking. I mean in person, face to face, without lawyers or threats or any of this bullshit. To what end? To figure out how we move forward, to discuss the divorce terms, to... He hesitated. To see if there's any way we can work this out. Victoria almost laughed. Almost. Work what out, exactly? Us. Our marriage. This situation. There is no situation, Adrian. You moved your girlfriend into my property and spent 6 months parading her around Manhattan like a trophy. You made your choice very clear. I made a mistake. You made several. Victoria, please. I know I fucked up. I know I hurt you. But we've been together 15 years. That has to count for something. It counts for a very expensive divorce settlement and a detailed division of assets. That's what 15 years counts for. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. She could hear him breathing on the other end, heavy and frustrated. Someone in the background laughed, high-pitched, female, not Lila. He'd already moved on to the next distraction. If you divorce me, Adrian said slowly, I'll make it very ugly. I'll drag your name through every tabloid in New York. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman you are. What kind is that? The kind who fucks mobsters while her husband is trying to save their marriage. Victoria's grip on her glass tightened, but her voice stayed level. First, I'm not sleeping with Dante. Second, you don't have a leg to stand on morally. Third, if you try to drag my name through anything, I have 6 months of documentation proving you've been embezzling from our joint accounts to fund your lifestyle with Lila. That's not wire transfers to her apartment, credit card charges for jewelry, a leased BMW in her name paid from our operating account. Should I continue? Silence. I didn't think so, Victoria said softly. Here's what's going to happen, Adrian. You're going to sober up, hire a better lawyer, and accept that this marriage is over. You're going to split our assets according to the prenuptial agreement you signed, which, if you recall, was very generous to you considering you brought nothing to this union. And you're going to do it quietly, with dignity, like an adult. And if I don't, then I'll do it loudly, publicly, and with every piece of evidence I've collected showing exactly how you violated our marriage contract, our financial agreements, and several tax codes. She took a sip of scotch, savoring the burn. Your choice, Adrian, easy or hard, but either way, we're done. You vindictive bitch. Probably, but I'm a vindictive bitch with better lawyers and cleaner hands. She paused. Oh, and Adrian, Lila needs to be out of the penthouse by Monday. I'm reclaiming it. You can't just... I absolutely can. Check the trust documents if you don't believe me. I've already had the locks changed. Security has her description. If she's still there by Monday at noon, she'll be removed. I suggest you warn her. She has nowhere to go. That's not my problem. You made her your responsibility when you moved her in. Now you can figure out where she goes next. Victoria set her empty glass down with a soft click. Good night, Adrian. Have your lawyer call mine on Monday. We have a lot to discuss. She hung up before he could respond, blocked his number for good measure, and poured herself another scotch. Her hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, probably. Or rage. Or the simple physical manifestation of 15 years of marriage dissolving in a single phone call. She'd expected to feel something more. Triumph, maybe. Or grief. Instead, she just felt tired and slightly numb and oddly relieved, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. The phone buzzed again. Not Adrian this time. She'd blocked him. A text from Dante. Got home safe. You okay? She stared at the message for a long moment, trying to figure out how to answer that. Was she okay? Objectively, yes. She was wealthy, healthy, free from a marriage that had been killing her slowly. She'd just executed a perfect public takedown of her husband and his mistress. She had a brilliant lawyer, a detailed exit strategy, and enough evidence to bury Adrian if he tried to fight dirty. But she was also alone in a beautiful empty house, drinking expensive scotch at midnight, having just ended a 15-year marriage via phone call while the man she might actually want to be with waited politely for permission to care about her. She typed back, "Define okay." His response came immediately. Breathing, not crying, not doing anything stupid. Then yes, I'm okay. Need company? I can be there in 20 minutes. The offer was tempting, dangerously so, but Victoria had spent enough of her life making decisions based on what she needed in the moment, rather than what she wanted long-term. I need to be alone tonight. Rain check? Anytime. I mean that. I know you do. She set the phone down before she could change her mind and do something stupid like actually take him up on the offer. Because having Dante Moretti show up at midnight with comfort and sympathy and those dark eyes that saw too much would lead exactly where she knew it would lead. And she wasn't ready for that yet. Wasn't sure if she'd ever be ready for that. The problem with men like Dante was that they made you want things you'd convinced yourself you didn't need. Safety. Partnership. Someone who saw the steel underneath and didn't flinch from it. Adrian had flinched. From day one, he'd flinched. He'd wanted the money and the name and the social access Victoria provided, but he'd never actually wanted her. Not the complicated, difficult, occasionally ruthless woman she actually was. He'd wanted a simpler version, easier to manage, more convenient to ignore. And she'd let him, because it was easier than fighting. But easy wasn't the same as right. Victoria finished her second scotch, rinsed the glass, and went upstairs. Her bedroom was as impersonal as the rest of the house. Expensive sheets, tasteful art, nothing that revealed anything real about the person who slept there. She'd decorated it that way on purpose. A space where Victoria the person could hide behind Victoria the performance. She was so tired of performing. Her phone buzzed one more time, a message from an unknown number. You looked beautiful tonight. Shame about the company you kept. No signature, no context, but the threatening undertone was clear. Victoria screenshot the message, forwarded it to her lawyer with a note. Add this to the file under Exhibit Q, harassment. Then she blocked the number, turned off her phone entirely, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Her mind kept replaying the night, Lila's face when she realized she'd lost, Adrian's barely controlled rage, Dante's quiet certainty, the crowd's whispers that would become tomorrow's headlines. By Monday morning, everyone would know. The marriage was over. Victoria was free. Adrian was finished. And somewhere in all of that, she needed to figure out who she was when she wasn't being someone's wife. She was almost asleep when she heard it, a car pulling up outside, idling for a moment, then driving away. She got up, looked out the window, saw nothing. Just Manhattan being Manhattan, all-night motion and sleepless energy. But when she checked her phone in the morning, after coffee, after shower, after pulling herself together enough to face whatever fresh hell the press had created overnight, there was a single text from Dante, time-stamped at 2:47 a.m. Drove by to make sure you were safe, saw your bedroom light on. Hope you got some sleep eventually. She stared at the message for a long time, coffee going cold in her hand. Drove by to make sure she was safe. Not to check up on her, not to control her, just to make sure she was safe. When had anyone ever done that? Victoria typed back, "Thank you." 2 words. Inadequate. But he'd understand. He always seemed to understand. Her phone rang immediately. Not Dante this time. Patricia, her assistant, voice tight with barely suppressed excitement. "Have you seen the internet?" "Good morning to you too, Patricia." "Victoria, you're everywhere. Every major society blog, 3 gossip sites, and someone made a TikTok that's already got 2 million views." "Of what?" "Of last night. Someone filmed the whole thing. You walking in with Dante, the confrontation with Adrian and Lila slapping him. It's captioned, "How to Destroy Your Husband's Mistress Without Saying a Word." You're a meme. Victoria closed her eyes. Fantastic. Actually, it kind of is. The comments are overwhelmingly on your side. People are calling you iconic. There's already fan art. Fan art. Someone drew you as a medieval queen executing peasants. It's very flattering, actually. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. The internet is insane. The internet loves a good revenge story, and you just gave them the best one they've seen in years. Patricia paused. Also, Marcus called. He wants to meet today instead of Monday. Says the timing is perfect for filing. Filing what? Everything. Divorce petition, asset freeze, restraining order against Adrian contacting you directly. He wants to move while public opinion is on your side. Victoria considered that, weighing the options. Moving fast meant Adrian wouldn't have time to mount a proper defense, but it also meant committing to a path she couldn't walk back from. Tell Marcus I'll meet him at 2. Done. Also, you have 43 interview requests. Deny all of them. Even Vanity Fair? Especially Vanity Fair. I'm not commenting on my personal life to the press. Smart. Let them speculate. Patricia cleared her throat delicately. One more thing. Lila Monroe called the office this morning. That got Victoria's attention. What did she want? To talk to you. She sounded desperate. I'm sure she did. What did you tell her? That you weren't available and wouldn't be available in the foreseeable future. Patricia hesitated. Should I have said something different? No, that was perfect. Victoria set her coffee down, suddenly not wanting it anymore. If she calls again, same answer. I have nothing to say to her. Understood. Anything else you need? Peace and quiet, but I don't think that's in the budget anymore. Patricia laughed. Probably not. I'll call you if anything urgent comes up. They hung up, and Victoria sat in her kitchen, all marble and stainless steel and morning light that made everything look clean and hopeful, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt genuinely happy. Not satisfied, not accomplished, not vindicated, just happy. The answer didn't come easy. She was staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, trying to decide if the woman looking back at her was a stranger or someone she'd simply forgotten, when her phone rang again. Marcus Chen didn't believe in wasting time with pleasantries. I'm moving the meeting up to 11, he said without preamble. Adrian's lawyer just filed a motion to freeze your personal accounts. Victoria's hand tightened on the edge of the sink. He can't do that. He can try. Judge Morrison is hearing emergency motions this morning, and Adrian's team is arguing you're liquidating assets to hide them from the divorce settlement. That's insane. I haven't touched anything. I know that. You know that. But Adrian's lawyer is very good at making noise, and Judge Morrison is old school enough to think wives need protecting from themselves. Marcus paused. Can you be at my office in an hour? I'll be there in 45 minutes. She hung up, abandoned her coffee, and went to get dressed. Not the armor she'd worn last night. That was for battles fought in public, under chandeliers with witnesses. This required something different, something that said competent, professional, absolutely not the hysterical wife her husband's lawyer would try to paint her as. She chose a navy suit, Armani, tailored to perfection, pearl earrings that had been her grandmother's, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a low bun. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who ran a $50 million foundation and sat on 4 corporate boards, a woman who knew more about money than Adrian had ever bothered to learn. The car service arrived exactly on time. She'd fired Adrian's preferred company 3 weeks ago and hired her own. Small moves, cutting ties one thread at a time until there was nothing left connecting them but paperwork and spite. Manhattan traffic was its usual nightmare, but her driver knew the routes. They made it to Marcus's office in Lower Manhattan with 5 minutes to spare. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place where serious money came to make serious decisions about other people's lives. Marcus was waiting in the lobby, which told her everything about how urgent this was. He was 52, brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and the only lawyer her father had ever trusted completely. He'd handled the prenuptial agreement when she married Adrian, and he told her then, 15 years ago, that the marriage would end badly. He'd been right. Thanks for coming on short notice, he said, leading her toward the elevators. Did I have a choice? Not really. He pressed the button for the 18th floor. Adrian's team is claiming you've been systematically hiding assets in preparation for divorce. They've got bank statements showing large transfers out of your joint accounts. Those were legitimate operational expenses for the foundation. I know, but they're arguing the foundation is just a shell you're using to move money around. They want everything frozen until a forensic accountant can review the records. How long would that take? Months, maybe longer if they drag it out. The elevator doors opened onto a floor of glass-walled conference rooms and harried associates carrying towers of files, which means you'd have no access to liquid assets during the divorce proceedings. Adrian doesn't have that kind of pull with judges. No, but his new lawyer does. Marcus led her into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. He hired Catherine Walsh. Victoria stopped walking. Walsh? The Walsh who destroyed Senator Morrison's wife in their divorce. The same. She's mean, expensive, and very good at making sympathetic clients out of cheating husbands. Marcus gestured to a chair. Apparently, Adrian liquidated some stocks to afford her retainer. Stocks that are probably half mine. Technically, yes. Practically, it's complicated. He sat across from her, already pulling files from his briefcase. Here's where we are. Adrian filed first thing this morning claiming irreconcilable differences and asking for an equitable split of all marital assets. Standard opening move. What's the non-standard part? The part where he's claiming you've been having an affair with Dante Moretti for over a year and that you've been using foundation money to fund your relationship. Victoria laughed. Actually laughed. That's absurd. It's also unprovable and salacious enough to make headlines, which is the point. Marcus slid a document across the desk. He's got photos of you and Dante at restaurants, leaving your townhouse, arriving at events together. His lawyer is building a narrative that you're an unfaithful wife who's been planning this divorce for months while bleeding the joint accounts dry. I met Dante 3 months ago. Can you prove that? She opened her mouth, closed it. Could she? Their first meeting had been casual, a chance encounter at a gallery opening. No photos, no witnesses who'd remember. Just two people having a conversation that led to coffee, that led to dinner, that led to whatever this complicated thing between them was becoming. I have phone records, she said finally, which show calls and texts going back 3 months. Adrian's team will argue those are just the calls you didn't bother to hide. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Look, I'm not worried about proving your innocence. I'm worried about the court of public opinion. You were the sympathetic party yesterday. Today, if this narrative gets traction, you become the cheating wife who's using daddy's money to hide assets. So what do? We go nuclear. He pulled out another file, this one significantly thicker. I've been documenting Adrian's financial improprieties for the past 8 weeks. Wire transfers to Lila Monroe's accounts. Credit card charges for jewelry, clothes, travel. A lease on a BMW he put in her name but paid for with joint funds. That penthouse you mentioned? He's been charging personal expenses to the property management account. How much are we talking? $300,000 over 6 months, maybe more. I'm still tracing some offshore accounts he thought he'd hidden well enough. Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. $300,000. Not enough to bankrupt them, but enough to sting. Enough to prove a pattern. He's been stealing from me. Technically from joint accounts, but yes. And that's just what I've found so far. Marcus tapped the file. We file a counter motion this afternoon showing Adrian's pattern of financial misconduct. We demonstrate that every transfer you made was legitimate and documented. We paint him as a desperate man making false accusations to distract from his own crimes. Will it work? It'll muddy the waters enough that Judge Morrison won't freeze your accounts, and it'll shift the narrative back in our favor. He paused. But Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What? Are you sleeping with Dante Moretti? The question hung in the air between them, clinical and necessary. No, Victoria said. We haven't even kissed. But you want to. Is that relevant? Everything's relevant when the other side is trying to destroy your credibility. Marcus's expression was neutral, professional. I'm not judging. I'm strategizing. If you and Dante are going to be in a relationship, we need to control that narrative. If you're not, We need to be very clear about that, too. Victoria thought about Dante's hand on her back last night, the way he looked at her like she was something rare and worth protecting. The text from 2:47 a.m. that proved he'd driven past her house just to make sure she was safe. I don't know what Dante and I are, she admitted. But whatever it is, it started after Adrian moved Lila into my penthouse. It started after my marriage was already over in every way that matters. That's good. We can work with that. Marcus made a note. One more thing. Lila Monroe has been trying to contact you. My assistant told me. She's also been trying to contact me and Adrian's lawyer, and apparently half of Manhattan society trying to tell her side of the story. Let me guess, she's the real victim in all this. Something like that. She's claiming Adrian promised to marry her, that she gave up her career for him, that she deserves compensation for emotional distress. Marcus smiled thinly. It's not going well for her. Most people are treating her like radioactive waste. Good. Is it? Because a desperate Lila Monroe might do something stupid, like sell her story to a tabloid, or make up allegations about you to stay relevant. Victoria considered that. What kind of allegations? Anything she thinks will stick. That you threatened her, that you're unstable, that you're using your wealth and connections to ruin an innocent woman's life. He shrugged. She's got nothing to lose at this point. So we neutralize her before she becomes a problem. How? I don't know yet, but there's always something. Victoria stood, walked to the window. The harbor stretched out below, gray and choppy under March clouds. Somewhere out there, Adrian was probably in his lawyer's office being coached on how to look sympathetic, and Lila was probably in whatever hotel room he'd stashed her in, realizing too late that being the other woman came with consequences. What time is the hearing? 2 o'clock. Judge Morrison's chambers. Marcus joined her at the window. I'll handle the legal arguments. You just need to sit there looking calm and credible. I can do calm and credible. I know you can. You've been doing it your whole life. He paused. Your father would be proud, you know, of how you're handling this. The mention of her father hit harder than expected. Harrison Hale had been dead 5 years, but Victoria still caught herself reaching for the phone to ask his advice. He'd never liked Adrian, had tolerated the marriage only because Victoria insisted. She wondered sometimes what he'd say about Dante. Probably something cryptic and wise that wouldn't make sense until later. My father would tell me to burn it all down and salt the earth, Victoria said. Probably. He had a vindictive streak. I come by it honestly. They spent the next hour reviewing documents and strategy. Marcus had prepared a counter-motion that was brutal in its precision. Every charge against Adrian backed by bank statements, emails, receipts. Every transfer Victoria had made cross-referenced with foundation records and board meeting minutes. It was overwhelming, thorough, devastating. It was also true, which helped. At 1:30, they gathered their files and headed to the courthouse. Marcus had warned her about photographers, but the reality was worse than she'd imagined. There must have been 20 of them camped outside, cameras ready, questions shouted over each other in an incomprehensible wall of noise. Victoria, is it true you're dating Dante Moretti? Mrs. Cole, how do you respond to allegations of an affair? Victoria, what do you say to women who think you're throwing away your marriage? Marcus had his hand on her elbow, steering her through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Don't answer. Don't even look at them. She kept her head up, her expression neutral, her pace steady. This was just another performance, another room where she had to be perfect because anything less would be weaponized against her. The courthouse was chaos. Lawyers and clients and families fighting over money and children and property. The machinery of divorce grinding through lives and spitting out strangers who used to love each other. Judge Morrison's chambers were on the 3rd floor, down a hallway that smelled like old coffee and institutional cleaning products. Adrian was already there with Catherine Walsh, both of them looking fresh and prepared and absolutely certain they were about to win. Adrian had aged since last night. Or maybe Victoria was just seeing him clearly for the first time in years. He looked tired, puffy around the eyes, his expensive suit not quite hiding the softness that came from too much drinking and not enough discipline. He glared at her with pure hatred. She smiled at him. Not a big smile, not vindictive, just a small, pleasant acknowledgement that she'd seen him and found him wanting. It made him furious, which was exactly the point. Catherine Walsh stood, extended her hand to Marcus with the kind of professional courtesy that didn't extend to genuine warmth. "Marcus, good to see you." "Catherine." Marcus shook her hand briefly. "Wish I could say the same. Nothing personal, just business." "Of course." They settled into chairs on opposite sides of the judge's desk, Victoria beside Marcus, Adrian beside Catherine, like a parody of their wedding day, facing forward, side by side with the wrong people. Judge Morrison entered a moment later. She was 70, sharp-eyed, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and the kind of face that had seen every dirty trick divorce lawyers could pull. She sat without ceremony, opened the file in front of her, and got straight to business. "This is a motion to freeze accounts filed by Adrian Cole against Victoria Hale. Mrs. Walsh, make your case." Catherine stood, smooth and professional. "Your Honor, my client has evidence that Mrs. Hale has been systematically moving assets out of their joint accounts in preparation for divorce. Over the past 6 months, she's transferred nearly $2 million to various accounts, including one held by the Hale Foundation, which she controls exclusively." "Those were legitimate business expenses," Marcus interjected. "That's for a forensic accountant to determine," Catherine shot back. "My client is simply asking for a temporary freeze to prevent further dissipation of marital assets while we sort out what belongs to whom." Judge Morrison looked at Victoria over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Hale, are you currently attempting to hide money from your husband?" Victoria met her gaze steadily. "No, Your Honor. Every transfer was documented and approved by our financial advisor. I'm happy to provide complete records." "The fact that she documented her asset hiding doesn't make it legal," Catherine argued. "And there's also the matter of her affair with Dante Moretti, which suggests a pattern of deception." Marcus stood so fast his chair scraped. "That's a baseless accusation with no evidence to support it. We have photographs of my client attending public events with a friend. That's not evidence of an affair." "Your Honor, if I may," Catherine's voice was silk over steel. "My client has been faithful throughout this marriage while Mrs. Hale has been conducting a relationship with a known associate of organized crime. The optics suggest nothing except that Mrs. Hale has friends her husband doesn't approve of." Marcus slid a file across the judge's desk. "What does suggest impropriety is this: documented evidence that Mr. Cole has been embezzling from joint accounts to fund his relationship with his mistress, Lila Monroe." Adrian's face went red. "That's not— Mr. Cole, you'll have your chance to speak." Judge Morrison opened the file Marcus had provided, started reading. Her expression didn't change, but her eyebrows rose slightly. Catherine leaned over to look at the documents, and Victoria watched her face shift from confident to concerned in the space of 3 seconds. "These transactions were approved," Catherine started. "By whom?" Marcus cut in. "Show me where Mrs. Hale approved $300,000 in personal expenses charged to joint accounts. Show me where she consented to her husband buying his girlfriend a car." "The BMW was a business expense. Registered in Lila Monroe's name and insured under her personal policy? That's an interesting definition of business expense." Judge Morrison held up a hand. "Enough. I've heard what I need to hear." She closed the file, looked at Adrian with an expression that could freeze lava. "Mr. Cole, did you or did you not use joint marital funds to purchase a vehicle for someone other than your wife?" Adrian's lawyer whispered something to him urgently. He ignored her. "I have a right to access our money. That's not what I asked. Yes or no, did you purchase a vehicle with marital funds for Lila Monroe?" The silence stretched. Adrian was trapped, and he knew it. Lying would be perjury. Telling the truth would sink his case. "Yes," he said finally, but Victoria never objected. Because Victoria didn't know. Marcus's voice was sharp, triumphant. She didn't know about the car, the jewelry, the apartment expenses, or any of the other financial improprieties my client has been committing. Judge Morrison looked at Catherine. "Do you have evidence that Mrs. Hale was aware of and approved these expenses?" "We're still gathering. That's a no." The judge turned to Victoria. "Mrs. Hale, Have you moved any money with the intent to hide it from your husband or prevent him from accessing his fair share of marital assets? No, Your Honor. Every transfer I've made has been for legitimate business or personal expenses, all properly documented and reported. And the foundation transfers? The Hale Foundation is a registered 501c3 with a board of directors and regular audits. I don't personally control its funds, the board does. I simply manage operations. Judge Morrison closed the file with a decisive snap. Motion to freeze accounts is denied. Mr. Cole, if you have concerns about how marital assets are being managed, you can raise them during the divorce proceedings. But based on what I'm seeing here, your own financial conduct is questionable enough that I'm not inclined to restrict Mrs. Hale's access to money that appears to be legitimately hers. Adrian looked like he'd been slapped. Your Honor, we're done here. Mrs. Walsh, control your client or I'll hold him in contempt. Judge Morrison stood, gathering her files. I'm ordering both parties to provide complete financial disclosures within 30 days. No more surprise bank accounts, no more hidden expenses. Everything on the table, transparent and documented. Understood? Yes, Your Honor, Marcus and Catherine said in unison. Good. Get out of my chambers. I have 12 more of these today, and I'm already tired of watching adults behave like children. They filed out into the hallway, Adrian seething beside his lawyer, Victoria maintaining her composure beside Marcus. The photographers were waiting at the bottom of the stairs, but Victoria had already won the battle that mattered. That went well, Marcus murmured. Better than expected. Catherine wasn't prepared for how much documentation we had. She thought it would be your word against Adrian's. She doesn't know me very well. Neither did Adrian, apparently. Marcus paused at the top of the stairs. You ready for the cameras? Do I have a choice? Not really. They descended together, and the questions started immediately, a barrage of noise and aggressive curiosity that felt like violence dressed up as journalism. Victoria, did the judge freeze your accounts? Mrs. Cole, are you and Dante Moretti engaged? Is it true Adrian bought his mistress a BMW? Marcus had coached her on this. Say nothing. Look confident. Let the silence speak for itself. But as they pushed through the crowd, someone shoved a microphone directly in her face and asked the question she couldn't ignore. Victoria, what would you say to Lila Monroe right now? She stopped walking. Marcus's hand tightened on her elbow in warning, but she was done being silent, done being the wife who took everything gracefully and never fought back. She looked directly at the camera, her voice clear and calm and absolutely lethal. I'd say she should have asked more questions before betting everything on a man who was never hers to win. Then she walked away, leaving the reporters scrambling to get the quote recorded properly, knowing it would be on every gossip site within the hour. Marcus waited until they were in the car before speaking. That was risky. That was necessary. It'll make Lila come after you harder. Let her. Victoria settled into the leather seat, suddenly exhausted. She's got nothing left to fight with except noise. Noise can be damaging. So can truth, and I've got significantly more of that than she does. She closed her eyes, letting the adrenaline drain slowly. Take me home, Marcus. I'm done performing for today. He gave the driver the address, and they rode in silence through Manhattan traffic. Victoria's phone was exploding with notifications. Texts from Patricia, emails from board members, messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly wanting to know if she was okay. She ignored all of it except one text from Dante. Saw the news. You were brilliant. Dinner tonight? She stared at the message for a long moment, weighing options. Saying yes meant acknowledging that whatever this was between them had moved beyond strategy into something real. Saying no meant playing it safe, keeping distance, maintaining control. Victoria was tired of playing it safe. 8 o'clock. Your choice of place. His response came immediately. I'll pick you up at 7:45. Wear something comfortable. Comfortable isn't usually dinner attire. Trust me. She did trust him, which was possibly the most surprising thing about all of this. Dante Moretti, with his dangerous family and his complicated empire and his eyes that saw straight through every defense she'd built, had somehow become the person she trusted most. The car pulled up to her townhouse. Marcus walked her to the door like a gentleman from another era. Call me if Adrian tries to contact you. he said. Or if Lila does, or if anything feels off. I will. And Victoria, you did good today. Really good. She smiled tiredly. Just following your instructions. No, you were yourself, calm, competent, absolutely certain of your worth. He squeezed her shoulder briefly. That's what wins cases like this. Not legal tricks, just being undeniably, obviously the better option. He left, and Victoria went inside to the silence of her empty house. But somehow it felt less empty now. Less like a mausoleum and more like a space waiting to be filled with something better than what she'd had before. She had 5 hours before Dante picked her up. 5 hours to shower, change, prepare herself for whatever came next. But first, she had something to take care of. She called Patricia. I need you to arrange something for me. Of course, what do you need? Get me a meeting with Lila Monroe. Somewhere public, but not too public. Somewhere she'll feel safe enough to show up, but exposed enough to behave. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Are you sure that's wise? Probably not. But I'm done letting her control the narrative. If she wants to tell her story, she can tell it to me first. On my terms. Where and when? Tomorrow, noon, the cafe at the Carlisle. I'll make it happen. Patricia paused. What are you planning? I'm going to give her a choice, Victoria said, and then I'm going to watch her make the wrong one. Dante picked her up at exactly 7:45, which somehow didn't surprise her. Men like him understood the power of reliability. He was driving himself again, the same sleek black sedan from the night before, and when he got out to open her door, he was wearing jeans and a leather jacket instead of the $1,000 suit she'd expected. Comfortable, he said, taking in her black pants and cashmere sweater. Good. You actually listened. Where are we going? You'll see. He held the door open, waited until she was settled before closing it gently. The interior smelled like leather and his cologne. Something woody and expensive that probably had an Italian name she couldn't pronounce. They drove in comfortable silence for a while, heading downtown through evening traffic. Victoria watched the city scroll past her window, all lit windows and neon signs, and the endless motion of people going somewhere else. Rough day? Dante asked finally. Define rough. Judge Morrison. Adrian's desperate attempt to freeze your money. The reporters. He glanced at her. That quote you gave them was perfect, by the way. Marcus thought it was risky. Marcus thinks everything is risky. That's what makes him a good lawyer. Dante turned onto a street Victoria didn't recognize, somewhere in the village where the buildings got shorter and the restaurants got more authentic. But sometimes risky is exactly what you need. Is that your business philosophy? Among other things. He pulled into a parking spot that seemed to appear exactly when they needed it, another small magic trick of his existence. Come on, I'm starving. The restaurant was tiny, wedged between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. No sign outside, just a red door with a small window. Inside was all dark wood and low lighting and the smell of garlic and tomatoes and bread baking somewhere in the back. An older woman appeared immediately, her face lighting up when she saw Dante. Dante, finally you come see me! She grabbed his face with both hands, pulled him down to kiss both cheeks. 3 months you don't visit. I think maybe you die. I've been busy, Mama Rosa. Too busy for family? Impossible. She turned to Victoria, her expression shifting from affection to sharp assessment in a heartbeat. And who is this beautiful woman you bring to my restaurant? Not that blonde girl with the loud laugh. That was 2 years ago, and no, this is Victoria. Dante's hand found the small of Victoria's back, gentle and possessive. Victoria, this is Rosa Moretti, my aunt. Former aunt, Rosa corrected. I divorced his uncle 20 years ago, but the family they keep me anyway because I make better pasta than any of them. She studied Victoria with the kind of thorough examination that felt invasive and oddly comforting at once. You are the wife, yes? The one in all the papers? Victoria blinked. Yes, I suppose I am. Good. That husband of yours, he looked like the type who order fish at an Italian restaurant. You can tell everything about a man by what he order. She grabbed 2 menus from behind a small desk. Come, I give you the best table. The best table turned out to be in the very back, tucked into a corner where they could see the whole restaurant, but remained partially hidden by a wine rack and a strategic ficus plant. Rosa seated them with the kind of efficiency that suggested she'd been doing this for 50 years, which she probably had. You want wine? Of course you want wine. I bring the good bottle, not the garbage we serve to tourists. She disappeared before either of them could respond. Victoria looked around the restaurant, maybe 12 tables total, half of them occupied by people who looked like regulars. Old couples who'd probably been coming here for decades. A few younger people who'd found the place by accident and felt like they'd discovered something special. This is not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Something more. You, exclusive, expensive, impossible to get into without knowing someone. Dante smiled. This is impossible to get into without knowing someone. Rosa doesn't advertise. No website. No reservations. No reviews. You either know about it or you don't. And you know about it because when my mother died, Rosa took me in for 3 months while my father figured out how to be a single parent. She fed me pasta and taught me how to play scopa and told me stories about the old country that were probably all lies but felt true. He leaned back in his chair, comfortable in a way Victoria had never seen him at the gala or in the car or anywhere else. This place is real. I thought you might need some real after a day of performing in court. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Victoria had spent the entire day being the perfect version of herself, composed in Marcus's office, dignified in court, poised for the cameras. She was exhausted from being exactly what everyone needed her to be. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For knowing that. Rosa reappeared with wine, a bottle with no label, just a year written in marker on the cork. She poured generous glasses for both of them without asking, then pulled out a notepad. Now, you eat what I make or you leave. I don't take orders, I don't do substitutions, I don't care about allergies unless you die from them. She looked at Victoria. You have allergies that kill you? No? Good. Dante? You know I'll eat anything you make. Such a good boy. I start you with the burrata, then the carbonara, then the ossobuco because you look too skinny and the signora here needs some meat on her bones too. She pointed at Victoria with her pen. You are too thin. Models are too thin. Real women have curves. I'm not. Victoria started. I know what you are. I read the papers. Your husband is a pig, his girlfriend is stupid, and you are too smart to have married either of them. Rosa tucked her notepad away. But tonight you eat good food with a good man and forget about pigs and stupid girls. Okay? It wasn't really a question. Rosa left before Victoria could respond, already barking orders in Italian to someone in the kitchen. Dante raised his wine glass. To forgetting about pigs and stupid girls. Victoria clinked her glass against his, drank, and felt some of the tension in her shoulders finally release. The wine was incredible, rich and complex, and probably cost more than the entire meal. She said as much. Rosa's late husband collected wine. When he died, she inherited a cellar worth about $2 million. She serves it to people she likes and charges them $10 a glass. Dante swirled his wine, watching the light catch it. Money's different when you have enough of it. It stops being about survival and starts being about what makes you happy. Is that how you see it? Sometimes. Other times money is just power with a prettier name. He set his glass down, leaned forward. Tell me about tomorrow. Tomorrow? You're meeting with Lila Monroe. Patricia called my assistant to clear it through me first, which I appreciate but wasn't necessary. Victoria frowned. Why would Patricia call your assistant? Because the Carlyle is owned by a company I have significant interest in. She wanted to make sure there wouldn't be any, complications. You own the Carlyle? I own 11% of the holding company that owns the Carlyle. It's complicated and boring and involves more shell corporations than I care to explain. He was watching her carefully. I'm not trying to control your meeting. I just want to make sure you're safe. Safe from what? Lila's 28 and weighs 115 pounds. I think I can handle her. I'm not worried about physical safety. I'm worried about what happens when a desperate person with nothing to lose sits down across from someone they blame for losing everything. The burrata arrived, interrupting the conversation. It was perfect, creamy and fresh with roasted tomatoes and basil and bread that was still warm from the oven. They ate in silence for a moment, and Victoria tried to remember the last time food had tasted this good. Not expensive restaurant good, just real, honest, made with actual care good. I need to talk to her, Victoria said finally. She keeps calling my office, my lawyer, even the foundation. She wants to tell her side of the story, and if I don't give her a controlled environment to do it, she'll do it somewhere worse. Like a tabloid. Exactly. At least if I meet her face to face, I can assess what kind of threat she actually poses. And if she poses a real threat? Victoria smiled, sharp and cold. Then I'll neutralize her before she becomes a problem. Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You're scary sometimes, you know that? Good. I've spent too many years being underestimated. I don't underestimate you. I've seen what you can do when you decide someone needs to be destroyed. He paused. I'm just making sure you've thought through the consequences. Of meeting with Lila? Of declaring total war on everyone who's wronged you. Adrian's one thing. He deserves everything you're planning to do to him. But Lila's just a stupid girl who made bad choices because she believed a man's lies. Are you defending her? I'm asking if you want to be the kind of person who destroys someone for being stupid. The question hit harder than Victoria expected. She set down her fork, really considered it. Did she want to destroy Lila? The honest answer was complicated. Part of her, the vindictive part that had been humiliated and betrayed, wanted to watch Lila lose everything. Wanted to see her broke and unemployable and publicly shamed until she understood exactly what it felt like to be Victoria for the past 6 months. But another part, the part that was tired of performing and hungry for something real, just wanted Lila to go away, to fade back into whatever mediocre existence she'd had before Adrian had convinced her she could be someone important. I don't know, Victoria admitted. I want her to stop being a problem. Whether that means destroying her or just scaring her into silence, I haven't decided yet. Fair enough. Dante reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Just promise me you'll think about it before you do something permanent. When did you become the voice of restraint? Since I started caring about what kind of person you become when this is all over. His thumb traced small circles on her palm. You can burn Adrian to the ground. He earned it, but don't let him turn you into someone you'll hate when you look in the mirror. The carbonara arrived before she could respond. Perfect pasta coated in egg and cheese and pancetta, simple and rich and exactly right. Rosa hovered for a moment, making sure they had everything they needed, then disappeared back into the kitchen. They ate, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, the absurdity of New York real estate, and the way the city kept changing while somehow staying exactly the same. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation Victoria hadn't had in years. Tell me about your mother, she said eventually. Dante's fork paused halfway to his mouth. That's random. You mentioned her earlier, Rosa taking you in. I'm curious. He set his fork down, took a sip of wine, buying time to decide how much to share. She died when I was 12. Cancer. Fast and brutal. One day she was fine. 6 months later she was gone. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But his voice had gone quiet, careful. She was good, though. Like genuinely good in a way that didn't fit with our family at all. My father was in the business. My uncles were in the business. Everyone I knew was in some version of the business. And she was just this kind, soft woman who baked cookies for the neighbors and volunteered at the church. How did she end up married to your father? Arranged marriage. Her family owed his family money, so they traded her to settle the debt. He said it casually, like he was describing a business transaction instead of someone's life. She made the best of it. Loved him despite everything. Loved me despite what I was probably going to become. And what did you become? Exactly what I was supposed to, what I was raised to be. He met her eyes. Does that bother you? Victoria considered the question honestly. Did it bother her that Dante Moretti was exactly what the FBI report said he was? That his wealth came from sources that operated in the gray spaces between legal and illegal? That his family name was synonymous with organized crime? No, she said finally. You're honest about what you are. That's more than I can say for most people. Including your husband? Especially my husband. Adrian spent our entire marriage pretending to be someone he wasn't. Self-made businessman, financial genius, master deal-maker. She laughed bitterly. He was none of those things. He was just a mediocre man who married well and convinced himself he'd earned everything he had. And you stayed with him anyway. I did. For 15 years I stayed with him because leaving felt harder than staying. Because admitting I'd made a mistake felt worse than living with the consequences. She pushed pasta around her plate. That's the thing nobody tells you about bad marriages. They don't end because someone cheats or lies or stops trying. They end when you finally get tired enough of your own bullshit to do something about it. Dante smiled. That's the most honest thing you've said all night. I'm tired of performing, tired of being the perfect wife, the perfect socialite, the perfect victim. I just want to be myself for a while, whoever that is. You're doing pretty well so far. The ossobuco arrived. Braised veal shanks that fell off the bone, served over risotto that was creamy and rich and probably contained half a pound of butter. They ate slowly, savoring it, and Victoria realized she hadn't thought about Adrian or Lila or the divorce for almost an hour. This was what peace felt like. I need to ask you something, Dante said as they were finishing, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay? Are you using me to make Adrian jealous? The question sat between them like a hand grenade with the pin pulled. Victoria set down her fork, met his eyes. At first, maybe a little. I called you because I knew showing up with you would make Adrian lose his mind. I knew it would shift the power dynamic in my favor. And now? Now I'm here because I want to be. Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me like I'm something more than a bank account or a social connection or a problem to be managed. She paused. Is that enough? For now. He signaled Rosa for the check, which she brought over with 2 small glasses of limoncello and a dismissive wave when he tried to pay. Family doesn't pay. You know this. She looked at Victoria. You come back soon, yes? Bring this one with you because he forget to visit if nobody remind him. I will. Good. And you, Rosa pointed at Dante with a stern finger. You take care of this woman. She is too good for you, but maybe you work hard and become worthy, I'll try, Rosa. You better than try. You succeed or I come to your house and break your kneecaps like the old days. She left them with that cheerful threat, and Dante stood, held out his hand to Victoria. Come on. I want to show you something. They drove further downtown, past the tourist areas and into the neighborhoods where real New Yorkers lived. Dante parked in front of a brownstone that looked like every other brownstone on the block. 3 stories, brick facade, iron gate protecting a small front garden. What is this about? Victoria asked. Somewhere I go when I need to remember who I am instead of what everyone expects me to be. He led her up the steps, unlocked the front door. Inside was warm and lived in, real furniture instead of decorator pieces, books on shelves instead of objects chosen for color coordination, family photos on the walls that showed actual history instead of staged memories. This is your place? One of them. My real place, not the penthouse where I take business associates or the estate in Connecticut where my family expects me to host holidays. He hung up his jacket, gestured for her to do the same. Nobody knows about this place except Rosa and maybe 3 other people in the world. Why are you showing me? Because I'm tired of performing too. He moved into the kitchen, a real kitchen with mismatched mugs and a coffee maker that looked like it had survived multiple decades, and started making espresso without asking if she wanted any. I've spent my whole life being Dante Moretti, heir to the family business, dangerous and connected and not someone you cross. And all of that's true. But it's not all I am. Victoria wandered the living room, studying the photos. Dante as a child with the woman who must have been his mother, her face kind, her smile genuine. Dante as a teenager, already tall and serious looking. Dante at what looked like a college graduation, Rosa on one side of him and an older man on the other. "Your father?" she asked, pointing to the older man. "Yeah, that was 6 months before he died. Heart attack, sudden and final." Dante brought her an espresso in a tiny cup that was probably worth $5 at Starbucks and tasted like it was worth 50. He was complicated. Mean when he drank, generous when he didn't. Loved me in his way, but wished I'd been tougher, more ruthless. Were you not ruthless enough? I was exactly ruthless enough to survive in that world, but I also went to Columbia for business instead of taking over immediately. I also asked questions instead of just following orders. He stopped, smiled slightly. I also don't enjoy hurting people, which in my family is basically a character flaw. Victoria sipped her espresso, considering that. So you're the mob boss with a conscience. I'm the guy trying to transition his family's business into something legitimate while not getting killed by the people who like things the old way. He sat on the couch, gestured for her to join him. It's complicated and exhausting, and some days I wonder why I bother. But you do bother. Because my mother would want me to. Because Rosa would be disappointed if I didn't. Because somewhere in all the mess, I actually believe things can be better than they were. Victoria sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. That's very optimistic for someone in your line of work. Yeah, well, I contain multitudes. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I need you to understand something, Victoria. If we do this, whatever this is, it's going to be complicated. There are people in my world who will see you as leverage against me. There are people in your world who will see me as a liability to you. And there's always the chance that the FBI decides to take another run at my family, and everyone close to us gets dragged through it. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest with you. Give you a choice with full information instead of pretty lies. Victoria thought about that, about the risk of being associated with Dante versus the safety of staying alone, about the possibility of something real versus the guarantee of something empty. I spent 15 years making the safe choice, she said. Marrying Adrian because he seemed stable and appropriate and likely to give me the kind of life everyone expected. Look how that turned out. So you're saying... I'm saying I'd rather take a risk on something real than play it safe with something hollow. She set her espresso down, turned to face him fully. But I need time. Time to finish what I started with Adrian. Time to figure out who I am when I'm not someone's wife. Time to be sure this isn't just revenge and proximity making me feel things that aren't actually there. Dante nodded slowly. That's fair. How much time? I don't know. A few months? Maybe longer? She reached out, took his hand. But I'm not asking you to wait around doing nothing. I'm just asking you to be patient while I figure my shit out. I can do patient. He laced his fingers through hers. I've been patient for 5 years. A few more months won't kill me. They sat like that for a while, comfortable in the silence, and Victoria felt something in her chest loosen that had been tight for longer than she could remember. This, sitting on a couch in a brownstone nobody knew about, holding hands with a man who saw her clearly and wanted her anyway, this felt more real than anything she'd experienced in her marriage. I should get home, she said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be intense. The meeting with Lila. Among other things. She stood, reluctantly letting go of his hand. Thank you for tonight, for roses, for this, for being honest. Any time. Dante drove her home through late-night Manhattan, the city quieter now, but still awake, still humming with possibility. When they pulled up in front of her townhouse, he put the car in park but didn't turn off the engine. Call me after the meeting tomorrow, he said. Let me know you're okay. I will. And Victoria, don't do anything I wouldn't do. That's not particularly limiting coming from you. He laughed. Fair point. Don't do anything you'll regret later. Better? Much better. She leaned across the console, kissed his cheek quickly before she could overthink it, then got out of the car before he could respond. She could feel him watching as she walked up the steps, unlocked her door, disappeared inside. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. That was unfair. Now I'm going to spend all night thinking about what an actual kiss would be like. She smiled despite herself, typed back. Good. Suffering builds character. I have plenty of character. What I need is less patience. You'll survive. Debatable. Good night, Victoria. Good night, Dante. She went upstairs, changed for bed, and lay awake staring at the ceiling for longer than she wanted to admit. Tomorrow, she'd face Lila Monroe. Tomorrow, she'd look across a table at the woman who'd tried to take everything from her and decide what kind of person she wanted to be when this was over. Merciful or merciless? Generous or cruel? The kind of woman who extended olive branches or the kind who burned everything to the ground? She still hadn't decided when she finally fell asleep. Morning came too early and too bright. Victoria woke to her phone ringing. Marcus, already working even though it was barely 7. Morning, she answered, her voice still rough with sleep. Lila's lawyer called. She wants to bring representation to the meeting. Victoria sat up, suddenly awake. Absolutely not. This is a personal conversation, not a negotiation. That's what I told him. He said Lila's concerned about being ambushed. By what? Words. Tell him if Lila wants to talk, she shows up alone at noon like Patricia arranged. Otherwise, the offer's off the table. Done. Also, I got the preliminary financial reports back from our investigator. Adrian's in worse shape than we thought. How bad? He's leveraged to the point of insolvency. The only thing keeping him afloat is his percentage of your joint assets and the income from properties that are technically yours. If the divorce goes through as planned, he'll be bankrupt within 6 months. Victoria processed that information, feeling less satisfaction than she'd expected. So he'll fight. He'll fight dirty. Catherine Walsh is already filing motions to delay proceedings, trying to drag this out long enough for him to liquidate assets we haven't frozen yet. Can she do that? She can try. But every delay works in our favor too. Gives us time to document every shady transaction, every hidden account, every lie he's told under oath. Marcus paused. The question is whether you want to drag this out or end it quickly. What do you recommend? Personally, I think you twist the knife. Make him suffer through a long public divorce that exposes every dirty secret. Make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man he is. And professionally? Professionally, I think you offer him a deal. He walks away with nothing but the clothes on his back and enough money to start over somewhere else. In exchange, the divorce is quick, quiet, and he never speaks publicly about you again. That's generous. That's strategic. A quick divorce means you're free faster. A clean break means he can't claim you ruined him or spend the next decade filing appeals and making your life miserable. Victoria walked to her window, looked out at the city waking up. Somewhere out there, Adrian was probably panicking, and Lila was probably rehearsing what she'd say at their meeting, and Dante was probably drinking coffee and thinking about their almost kiss. Let me talk to Lila first, Victoria said. Depending on how that goes, I'll decide what to do about Adrian. Fair enough. Be careful today. Desperate people do stupid things. I'm always careful. She hung up, showered, dressed in what she thought of as her armor. Another suit. This one, charcoal gray with heels that made her tall enough to look down on most people. She pulled her hair back severely, applied makeup that made her look polished and unapproachable. She was going into battle. Might as well look the part. The Carlisle was exactly what it had always been, old money and older traditions, the kind of place where waiters remembered your usual order and nobody looked twice at celebrities. Victoria arrived 15 minutes early, claimed a table in the back of the cafe where she could see the entrance, and ordered coffee she didn't drink. Lila arrived at 12:03, which was either fashionably late or nervously delayed. She looked different than she had at the gala, smaller somehow, less polished. Her dress was expensive but slightly wrong for daytime. Her makeup was too heavy. Her confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. She spotted Victoria, hesitated, then walked over with the expression of someone approaching a firing squad. Thank you for agreeing to meet me, Lila said, her voice smaller than Victoria remembered. Sit down. Lila sat, arranged her purse, fidgeted with her napkin. Up close, she looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. A brittleness to her smile that suggested she'd been crying recently. Good. I wanted to explain, Lila started. I don't need your explanations. I need you to listen. Victoria's voice was calm, controlled, lethal. You have two options. Option one, you disappear. You leave New York. You never speak to Adrian again. You never sell your story to any media outlet, and you never mention my name in public. In exchange, I'll give you $50,000, enough to start over somewhere else. Lila's eyes went wide. That's option two. You stay in New York and try to fight me. You do interviews, you make accusations, you try to paint yourself as the victim in all this. And in response, I destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd taken the money. You can't. I can and I will. I have resources you can't imagine and patience you can't outlast. I will make sure you never work in this city again. I will make sure every door you try to open slams in your face. I will make your life so miserable that disappearing starts to look like mercy. Lila's hands were shaking. Why are you doing this? Because you tried to take my life, my husband, my home, my reputation. You didn't succeed, but you tried. And I need you to understand that actions have consequences. I loved him. Lila's voice cracked. I actually loved him, and he used me, and now everyone thinks I'm some kind of gold-digging whore. You slept with a married man and moved into his wife's apartment. What did you think people would call you? The cruelty of it made Lila flinch, but Victoria didn't soften. She couldn't afford to. Not now. I was stupid, Lila whispered. I know that now, but I didn't set out to ruin your marriage. He told me you were separated. He told me the divorce was basically done. He told me he lied to you, just like he lied to me, just like he lies to everyone. Victoria leaned forward slightly. But here's the thing, Lila. His lies don't absolve you of responsibility. You made choices, you pursued a married man, you accepted expensive gifts bought with money that wasn't his, you stood in my ballroom wearing my diamonds and thought you'd won. I'm sorry. Tears were running down Lila's face now, ruining her makeup. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. Victoria studied her for a long moment, trying to find satisfaction in Lila's tears and finding only emptiness. This woman wasn't her enemy. She was just another person Adrian had used and discarded, another casualty in his endless need for validation. Take the money, Victoria said quietly. Leave New York. Build a life somewhere else. Somewhere you can be more than the girl who made bad choices for the wrong man. Lila looked up, mascara streaking her face. Why would you give me money? Because I'm tired. I'm tired of fighting, tired of revenge, tired of being angry, and because destroying you won't change what happened. Victoria pulled an envelope from her purse, slid it across the table. There's a check for $50,000. Cash it, disappear, and we never speak again. Or don't, and deal with the consequences. Lila picked up the envelope with shaking hands, opened it, stared at the check like it might disappear. I don't understand. You don't have to. You just have to choose. Victoria stood, gathering her purse. You have 48 hours to cash that check and leave the city. After that, the offer expires and we do this the hard way. She left without waiting for a response, walked out of the Carlisle into bright afternoon sunshine, and called Dante. How'd it go? He asked immediately. I gave her money and told her to leave town. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, Really? Really? Turns out I don't have the energy to destroy someone just for being stupid. Victoria walked toward Fifth Avenue, letting the crowd absorb her. You were right. I don't want to be the kind of person who wins by making everyone else lose. I'm proud of you. Don't be. I'm still going to eviscerate Adrian. Well, yeah, he actually deserves it. She could hear the smile in Dante's voice. Feel like celebrating your newfound mercy with dinner tonight? Can't. I have to meet with Marcus and finalize divorce strategy. Tomorrow then? Tomorrow works. She hung up feeling lighter than she had in days. Lila would take the money. Victoria was certain of that. And tomorrow she'd sit down with Marcus and figure out exactly how to dismantle Adrian's life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but rubble and regret. But tonight, she'd go home to her empty townhouse, pour herself expensive scotch, and start planning the next phase of her life. The phase where she wasn't anyone's wife, just Victoria, whoever that turned out to be. 3 weeks later, Victoria sat in Marcus's office signing the final divorce papers with a pen that cost more than her first car. Her signature was steady, practiced, each loop and curve as controlled as everything else in her carefully reconstructed life. "That's it," Marcus said, witnessing her signature with his own. "Officially over. The judge will sign off within 48 hours, but for all practical purposes, you're a free woman." Free. The word should have felt triumphant. Instead, it just felt heavy, weighted with all the years she'd spent being someone's wife and all the uncertainty of figuring out who she was without that identity. "Adrian signed this morning," Marcus continued, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "No fight, no appeals, no last-minute dramatics. Catherine Walsh said he looked like someone had died when he put pen to paper." What did he get? Exactly what the prenup stipulated. $2 million, his personal effects, and the 2018 Range Rover. Everything else stays with you. The properties, the foundation, the investment portfolio, all of it. Marcus smiled, sharp and satisfied. "He's officially broke, Victoria. Without your money propping him up, his debts are going to eat him alive." She should have felt vindicated. Should have felt the rush of victory she'd been anticipating for months. Instead, she just felt tired. What about Lila? Cashed your check within 24 hours and left for Los Angeles 3 days later. Her Instagram went dark, her phone's disconnected, and according to my sources, she's waitressing at some restaurant in Santa Monica under a different name. Good for her. Marcus looked at her curiously. "You actually mean that?" "I do. She was stupid, not evil. She deserves a chance to rebuild somewhere people don't know her as Adrian Cole's mistress. You're more generous than I would have been." "I'm tired of revenge, Marcus. It's exhausting, and it doesn't actually change anything." Victoria stood, walked to the window overlooking Lower Manhattan. From here, the city looked clean and organized, all those messy human lives reduced to neat geometric patterns. "Did Adrian say anything when he signed?" "He asked if there was any chance you'd reconsider. And you told him." "I told him that ship didn't just sail, it sank, and the wreckage is at the bottom of the ocean being eaten by sharks." Marcus joined her at the window. He looked old, Victoria, broken, like he'd finally realized what he'd lost and couldn't figure out how to get it back. He can't get it back. That's the point. "I know, but watching it happen, watching a man realize he destroyed the best thing in his life for something shiny and temporary, it's almost sad." "Almost," Victoria agreed, "but not quite." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city move below them. Somewhere down there, Adrian was probably in a lawyer's office that wasn't as nice as this one, signing away his last claim to the life he'd taken for granted. And somewhere in Los Angeles, Lila was probably serving overpriced salads to tourists and trying to forget she'd ever been stupid enough to believe a married man's promises. And Victoria was here, free and wealthy, and utterly uncertain about what came next. "What are you going to do now?" Marcus asked, like he'd read her mind. "I have no idea." "That's probably the healthiest thing I've heard you say in months." Her phone buzzed. A text from Dante. "Dinner tonight? I promise no heavy conversations about divorce or revenge, just food and maybe some mindless distraction." She smiled despite herself, typed back, "What kind of distraction?" "The kind where we eat too much pasta and argue about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It's not. Heresy. I'll pick you up at 7 and we can debate properly." Marcus was watching her with undisguised amusement. "That's a different smile than the one you've been wearing lately." "Is it?" "It's real. Less performance. More actual feeling." He returned to his desk, started organizing files. "For what it's worth, I like Dante. He's dangerous and complicated and probably not what your father would have chosen for you, but he sees you clearly. That's rare." "You've been talking to him?" "His lawyer and I have had several conversations about how to protect your assets in case your relationship becomes serious. It's boring legal stuff, nothing romantic." Marcus paused. "But Dante insisted on signing a document stating he has no claim to anything you owned before or during your marriage to Adrian. He wanted it in writing that he's not interested in your money." Victoria sat back down, processing that. "When did he do this?" 2 weeks ago. right after your meeting with Lila. Marcus slid a copy of the document across the desk. Read it yourself. She did. It was straightforward, legally binding, and completely unnecessary unless Dante actually cared about making sure she knew his intentions were genuine. The fact that he'd done this without telling her, without asking for credit or recognition, meant more than expensive dinners or protective gestures. It meant he understood what she needed to feel safe. I'm going to Paris, Victoria said suddenly. Marcus blinked. What? Paris. Next month. The foundation has an international conference there, and I've been putting off attending for years because Adrian hated traveling. But I'm going, and I'm going to stay for a while, maybe a few months. The idea crystallized as she spoke, becoming more certain with each word. I need to remember who I was before I became someone's wife, before New York society and charity galas and performing for people who don't actually matter. That's... Marcus seemed to struggle for words. That's actually perfect. Is it? You've spent the last 6 months fighting. You won. Now you need to figure out what winning actually means. He smiled, genuine and warm. Go to Paris, drink wine, visit museums, have a ridiculous affair with a French intellectual who quotes Sartre and smokes too much. Victoria laughed. I'm not having an affair with anyone. Then have croissants. Sit in cafes. Be a person instead of a project. Marcus stood, extended his hand formally. It's been an honor representing you, Victoria, and I mean that. You could have let Adrian steamroll you. Instead, you dismantled him with precision and grace. She shook his hand, then impulsively hugged him. Thank you for everything, for believing me when I said I wanted out, for building the case, for never once suggesting I should just take his apology and move on. You deserve better than Adrian Cole ever could have given you. I just helped you realize that legally. He walked her to the elevator, pressed the call button. When do you tell Dante about Paris? Tonight, I guess. He's going to offer to come with you. I know. Are you going to let him? Victoria considered that as the elevator arrived, doors opening with a soft chime. I don't know yet. Maybe for part of it. Maybe not at all. I need to figure out who I am when I'm alone before I can figure out who I am with someone else. Smart woman. Trying to be. The elevator ride down was long and contemplative. When she emerged onto the street, Manhattan hit her with its usual assault of noise and motion and aggressive life. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Victoria felt energized. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the future was entirely hers to design. She walked instead of calling her car service, letting the city flow around her, past tourists taking selfies in Times Square, past businessmen arguing on phones, past street vendors and artists and the endless variety of humans, all trying to make it in the city that promised everything and delivered whatever you were strong enough to take. Her phone rang. Not Dante this time. Patricia. The press is calling, her assistant said without preamble. Everyone wants a statement about the divorce being finalized. What should I tell them? Tell them Mrs. Hale has no comment on her personal life and is looking forward to focusing on the Foundation's international initiatives. That's boring. That's intentional. I'm done being interesting to the press. Fair enough. Also, you have 17 interview requests, including one from Vanity Fair that's offering a very flattering photo spread and editorial control. Decline all of them. Even Vanity Fair? Especially Vanity Fair. I'm not interested in telling my story to people who just want to sell magazines. Victoria turned onto Fifth Avenue, letting her feet carry her uptown. I'm going to Paris next month for the Foundation conference. Clear my schedule for at least 8 weeks. Patricia was quiet for a moment. 8 weeks is a long time. I know. I'm taking a sabbatical. You'll manage the Foundation operations here, and I'll handle the international relationships from there. Can I ask why? Because I've spent 41 years being who everyone expected me to be, and I'd like to spend some time figuring out who I actually am. Victoria stopped walking, stood in the middle of the sidewalk, while people flowed around her like water around a stone. Book me a suite at the Ritz, something long-term, and start reaching out to our European partners about potential collaborations. Done. Should I arrange for Dante to visit? No. If he visits, it'll be because I invited him, not because you scheduled it. Patricia laughed. You really like him. I really do, which is why I need to be sure about it before I let it become something permanent. She started walking again, more purpose in her step now. Anything else? Just this. I'm proud of you. For leaving Adrian, for handling this whole thing with dignity, for choosing yourself instead of what was easy or expected. You're going to do amazing things in Paris. The unexpected emotion in Patricia's voice made Victoria's throat tight. Thank you. That means more than you know. Go have dinner with your maybe boyfriend. Stop thinking about Adrian and lawyers and what everyone else thinks. Just be happy for one night. I'll try. She hung up and walked the rest of the way home, her townhouse waiting like a sanctuary. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it, clean, minimalist, still slightly impersonal despite her efforts. But soon it would be empty for months while she was in Paris. The thought should have been unsettling. Instead, it felt like freedom. Dante arrived at exactly 7, dressed casually in dark jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than it looked like. He held a bottle of wine in one hand and a bag from a bakery in the other. I brought cannoli from this place in Brooklyn that Rosa says is almost as good as hers, which is basically the highest compliment food can receive. He kissed her cheek, easy and familiar, then headed to her kitchen like he'd been there 100 times. How'd the signing go? It's done. Officially divorced as of whenever Judge Morrison gets around to signing the final decree. How do you feel? Victoria thought about that while Dante opened the wine with practiced efficiency. Lighter, like I've been carrying something heavy for so long I forgot it was there until I put it down. That's good. He poured 2 glasses, handed her one. To being free. They clinked glasses, drank, and Victoria let herself just exist in the moment. No strategy, no performance, no careful calculation of what came next. Just wine and a man who saw her clearly, and cannoli that turned out to be almost as good as Rosa claimed. I'm going to Paris, she said between bites of ricotta-filled pastry. Next month. For at least 8 weeks, maybe longer. Dante didn't look surprised. Alone? Mostly. The foundation has a conference there, but after that I'm just going to visit museums, sit in cafes, remember what it's like to be Victoria without any qualifiers or obligations. That sounds perfect. You're not going to offer to come with me? Do you want me to? I don't know, part of me does. Part of me thinks I need to do this alone. Dante set down his wine, turned to face her fully. Then do it alone. I'll still be here when you get back. What if I'm gone for months? Then I'll miss you for months. Victoria, I'm not going anywhere. You need space to figure out who you are without being Adrian's wife or anyone else's anything? Take it. I'm not so insecure that I need you to choose me right this second. The casual certainty in his voice, the complete absence of pressure or manipulation, made something in Victoria's chest crack open. I could fall in love with you, she said quietly. If I let myself, if I'm not careful. Would that be so terrible? I don't know. I've been wrong about love before. I thought I loved Adrian once, back when we first got married. I thought that was what love looked like, comfortable and appropriate and stable. I was so wrong, it's almost funny. What does love look like to you now? Victoria considered that, looking at Dante sitting in her kitchen eating cannoli like this was the most natural thing in the world. Honest, complicated. Someone who sees all the messy, difficult parts of you and doesn't flinch. Someone who drives by your house at 2 a.m. just to make sure you're safe without needing credit for it. Dante smiled. Specific example there. You're terrible at being subtle. I'm not trying to be subtle, I'm trying to be present without being overwhelming. He reached across the counter, took her hand. Go to Paris. Take all the time you need. If you come back and decide you want to see where this goes, I'll be here. If you come back and decide you need more time alone, I'll respect that. And if you come back and decide I'm not what you want at all, I'll be disappointed, but I'll survive. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. I like you. You like me. Everything else is just details we figure out as we go. They finished the cannoli and wine, talking about nothing important. Books they'd read, places they wanted to visit, the absurdity of New York rent prices, even for people who could afford them. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that happened when two people actually enjoyed each other's company instead of just performing compatibility. Around midnight, Dante stood to leave. I should go. Let you get some sleep before you start planning your Parisian adventure. Victoria walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to let the night end. Dante? Yeah? When I come back from Paris, assuming I haven't run off with a French intellectual who quotes Sartre, I'd pay money to see you with someone who quotes Sartre. Would you want to try this for real? Not as strategy or performance or revenge against Adrian, just as two people who like each other seeing if it could become something more? He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. I'd like that very much. Good, because I think I would too. He kissed her then, not the cheek kiss from earlier, but a real kiss that was gentle and searching and full of possibility. It didn't last long, neither of them was ready for more than that yet, but it was enough to confirm what Victoria had suspected for weeks. This could be real. If she let it, if she was brave enough. Good night, Victoria. Good night, Dante. She watched him drive away, then went upstairs to her bedroom and stared at the ceiling for the second time in 3 weeks. But this time she wasn't thinking about revenge or divorce or Adrian's humiliation. She was thinking about Paris, about museums and cafes and the possibility of becoming someone new, about Dante waiting patiently for her to figure herself out, about the fact that at 41, her life was finally, genuinely, entirely her own. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and gradual goodbyes. She met with the foundation board, outlined her plans for the Paris conference and the international partnerships she wanted to develop. She had dinner with Rosa, who cried and made her promise to eat properly and send postcards. She had coffee with Marcus, who gave her a list of excellent lawyers in France just in case she needed them. And she saw Dante 3 times a week, dinners, walks through Central Park, one memorable afternoon at the Met, where they argued about Caravaggio and kissed in front of a Vermeer when they thought nobody was looking. It was the beginning of something, not rushed, not desperate, just slowly building toward whatever it was going to become. She didn't hear from Adrian. According to Marcus, he'd moved to Connecticut and taken a job with a mid-tier real estate firm that probably paid 1/10 of what he'd been making. Catherine Walsh had dropped him as a client when the retainer ran out and he couldn't afford to refill it. His social media had gone dark. His friends had moved on to newer, shinier people to orbit. He'd become exactly what he feared most: irrelevant. Victoria felt no satisfaction in this, no triumph, just a distant sort of pity for a man who'd had everything and destroyed it because he couldn't appreciate what he had until it was gone. Lila sent her one email, brief and carefully worded. Thank you for the chance to start over. I'm sorry for my part in hurting you. I hope you find happiness. Victoria deleted it without responding. Some conversations didn't need to continue. The day before her flight to Paris, Patricia threw her a small goodbye party at the foundation offices. Just the staff, some board members, a few close friends. Someone made a speech about Victoria's vision and leadership. Someone else presented her with a ridiculous oversized key to Paris made out of foam board. It was silly and sweet and exactly what she needed. Dante showed up near the end, looking slightly out of place among the nonprofit professionals and society ladies. But he brought Rosa, who immediately took over the kitchen and started making coffee because American coffee was an insult to civilized people everywhere. You didn't have to come, Victoria said, finding him near the windows. I wanted to see you off properly. He handed her a small box, wrapped simply. Open it later, when you're on the plane or lonely in your hotel, or whenever you need a reminder that someone's thinking about you. Dante. It's not a ring or anything serious, just something I saw and thought you'd like. He squeezed her hand briefly. Have an amazing time, Victoria. Send postcards or don't. Call me or don't. Just be happy. She kissed him in front of everyone, not caring who saw or what they'd say about it later. I'll call. Maybe not every day, but I'll call. I'm counting on it. The party wound down. People left. Patricia supervised the cleanup with military efficiency, and Victoria went home to finish packing, her apartment already looking abandoned with half her clothes in suitcases and her personal items boxed up for storage. That night, she couldn't sleep. Too much anticipation, Too much uncertainty about what she was doing and whether running away to Paris was brave or cowardly. Around 2 a.m., she opened Dante's gift. Inside was a small leather journal, expensive and well-made, with a note tucked into the first page. For documenting your adventure, or grocery lists, or angry rants about French waiters, whatever you need it to be. Write your own story this time instead of living in someone else's. D. She held the journal for a long time, feeling the weight of it, the possibility contained in all those blank pages. Then she opened to the first page and wrote, "My name is Victoria Hale. I am 41 years old. I am recently divorced, financially independent, and completely uncertain about what comes next. This terrifies me. This excites me. This is mine." It wasn't poetry, it wasn't profound, but it was true. The flight to Paris was long and mostly sleepless. Victoria arrived at Charles de Gaulle exhausted and jet-lagged and weirdly euphoric. The driver Patricia had arranged took her to the Ritz, where her suite overlooked Place Vendôme and made her New York townhouse look modest by comparison. She unpacked, showered, changed, and walked out into Paris like she'd been doing it her whole life. The city was exactly what she remembered from brief visits years ago, beautiful and dirty and utterly confident in its own importance. She walked without destination, letting the streets carry her past patisseries and bookstores and cafes where people sat for hours over single espressos. She bought a croissant from a bakery that smelled like butter and heaven. She sat in the Tuileries garden watching children sail toy boats in the fountain. She visited the Musée d'Orsay and stood in front of the Monets until her eyes watered from beauty or exhaustion or both. And slowly, gradually, she felt something inside her shift. For the first time in years, maybe ever, she was just Victoria. Not someone's wife, not a foundation director, not a society figure with a reputation to maintain, just a woman in Paris eating good bread and looking at art and figuring out who she wanted to be. The foundation conference was successful. She made connections with European partners, discussed potential collaborations, gave a speech about international philanthropy that was well received and probably too technical. But her heart wasn't in the networking and strategic conversations. Her heart was in the cafes and museums and long walks along the Seine. She called Dante once a week, telling him about what she'd seen and eaten and discovered. He told her about New York, about Rosa's latest attempt to set him up with her neighbor's daughter, about the business deals he was working on that were slowly transitioning his family's empire into something legitimate. "Do you miss me?" he asked during one call. "Yes," Victoria admitted, "but I also need this time to be alone with myself." "I know, I'm not complaining, just checking in." "How much longer can you wait?" "As long as you need. I'm patient when it matters." 3 months into her Paris sabbatical, Victoria was sitting in a cafe near her hotel when she saw them. A couple, probably in their 60s, holding hands across the table and laughing about something private and wonderful. They had the easy intimacy of people who'd been together forever, who'd survived all the shit life threw at them and come out the other side still choosing each other. That was what she wanted. Not the performance of love or the appearance of partnership. The real thing. Messy and complicated and absolutely worth it. She pulled out her phone, sent Dante a text. "I think I'm ready to come home. Not because Paris isn't amazing. Because I miss you, and I want to see if this thing between us is as real as it feels." His response came immediately. "When's your flight? I'll pick you up." "Next week." "And Dante?" "I'm not coming back to be careful or take it slow. I'm coming back to actually try. Are you ready for that?" "I've been ready since the day you called me 3 months ago asking for help. Welcome home, Victoria." She flew back to New York on a Tuesday, carrying more luggage than she'd left with because she'd bought too many books and clothes and random objects that reminded her of her time being free. Dante was waiting at arrivals, holding a sign that said, "Mrs. Not Cole anymore," that made her laugh so hard she cried. "Too much?" he asked, pulling her into a hug that felt like coming home. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect." "Now you're just lying." "I'm really not." They loaded her luggage into his car, and he drove her not to her townhouse, but to the brownstone in the village, the real place where he was actually himself. "I thought you might want somewhere that feels less like your old life," he explained. "But if you'd rather go home, that's fine too." Here's good. Here is really good. They carried her bags inside, and Rosa appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron and a triumphant expression. Finally, 3 months you make this boy wait. I think maybe you too smart for him. She grabbed Victoria's face, kissed both cheeks. But you come back, so maybe you not too smart after all. Rosa, Dante warned. What? I speak truth. Now you both sit. I make dinner. We celebrate her not being stupid anymore. Dinner was magnificent. Rosa's cooking always was. They ate and drank wine, and Rosa told embarrassing stories about Dante as a child while he protested, and Victoria laughed until her sides hurt. Around midnight, Rosa left, making them promise to visit her restaurant soon. And suddenly, Victoria and Dante were alone in his real home, surrounded by the evidence of his actual life instead of the performance he showed the world. So, he said, you came back. I did. Any regrets? About Paris? No. About coming back? Ask me in 6 months. Fair enough. He pulled her close, his arms around her waist, her head against his chest, where she could hear his heartbeat. I missed you. More than I thought I would. I missed you too. Turns out cafes and museums are less fun when you can't argue with someone about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. It absolutely is. It absolutely is not. He kissed her then, properly this time, the kind of kiss that promised more if they wanted it, but didn't demand anything she wasn't ready to give. It was patient and searching and completely honest in a way Adrian had never been. I love you, Dante said quietly. I probably shouldn't say that this soon, but I'm tired of playing games. I love you. You don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel the same way. I just wanted you to know. Victoria looked up at him, this complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who'd driven past her house at 2 a.m. to make sure she was safe, who'd signed documents giving up any claim to her money, who'd waited 3 months without complaint while she figured herself out in Paris. I love you too, she said. And before you ask, yes, I'm sure. Yes, I've thought about it. Yes, I know it's fast and complicated and probably a terrible idea for about 15 different reasons. I don't care. I love you anyway. His smile was everything, relief and joy and something that looked like wonder. So what now? He asked. Now we figure it out as we go. No performance, no strategy, just two people who actually like each other seeing what happens next. I can work with that. They stayed up until dawn, talking about everything and nothing, about his plans to fully legitimize the family business within 5 years, about her vision for expanding the foundation's international work, about whether they'd live in her townhouse or his brownstone or find somewhere new that belonged to both of them, about the future that was finally, genuinely, entirely theirs to build. 2 years later, Victoria stood in a different ballroom at a different gala, wearing a different dress and a wedding ring that Dante had designed specifically for her. Simple, elegant, impossible to mistake for anything Adrian had ever given her. The event was for the foundation, now successfully operating programs in 12 countries and expanding rapidly. She gave a short speech about their latest initiative in East Africa, keeping it brief because she knew nobody really wanted to hear long speeches at charity events. Afterward, people came up to congratulate her, not on the foundation's work, but on her marriage, on how happy she looked, on how perfect she and Dante seemed together. She smiled and accepted the compliments, but she knew the truth. They weren't perfect. Dante still worked too much and kept parts of his business life carefully separate from their personal life. She still had moments of anxiety, convinced that happiness this genuine couldn't possibly last. They fought about stupid things, whose family to spend holidays with, whether to get a dog, the correct way to load a dishwasher. But they were real and honest and building something that belonged to them instead of performing for everyone else. Across the room, she caught Dante's eye. He was talking to Rosa and Marcus and Patricia, all of them laughing about something, but he winked at her over Rosa's head. A private joke, a shared moment, a reminder that they were partners in this, whatever this was becoming. She thought about Adrian sometimes, wondered if he ever regretted what he'd destroyed, if he ever thought about the wife he'd taken for granted until it was too late. Marcus said he'd gotten remarried, someone younger again, someone who probably reminded him of Lila or the version of Victoria he'd imagined she was. Victoria hoped he was happy, in whatever limited way men like him could be happy. But mostly she didn't think about him at all. She thought about this foundation's expansion into South America, about the trip to Tokyo she and Dante were planning for next month, about the house they'd bought in the south of France where they spent summers doing absolutely nothing productive, about the life she'd built after burning down everything that didn't serve her. Someone asked her once, a reporter doing a puff piece about successful women over 40, what advice she'd give to women in bad marriages. Leave, Victoria had said simply. Stop waiting for him to change or apologize or suddenly become who you need him to be. Stop thinking you can fix something that's fundamentally broken. Stop being afraid of starting over because starting over is better than staying stuck. The reporter had pressed for something more nuanced, more diplomatic. Victoria had refused to give it to her because the truth was simple, even if it wasn't easy. Life was too short to spend it being someone else's supporting character. Too precious to waste on men who couldn't see your value. Too important to perform happiness when you could be actually living it. She'd spent 15 years married to the wrong person, playing a role she didn't want in a story someone else had written. And then she'd stopped. She'd taken her life back piece by piece, dollar by dollar, decision by decision, until it was finally, genuinely, undeniably hers. That was the real victory. Not destroying Adrian, though watching his empire crumble had been satisfying. Not the money, or the property, or the public vindication. The real victory was standing in a ballroom wearing a ring from a man who saw her clearly, running a foundation that actually mattered, living a life she'd designed instead of one she'd settled for. Dante appeared beside her, handed her a glass of champagne, pressed a kiss to her temple that was casual and affectionate and completely unconscious. "Ready to get out of here?" he asked. "Rosa wants us to come to the restaurant, something about a new dessert she's testing. Always with the food. She's Italian. It's genetic." He smiled. "We don't have to go if you're tired." "No, let's go. I'd rather eat Rosa's experimental desserts than make small talk with people who only care about the foundation because it makes them look good." They made their excuses, gathered their coats, and slipped out into the New York night. The city was the same as always, loud and dirty and absolutely alive with possibility. They walked to the car hand in hand, and Victoria felt something she'd spent most of her life chasing and never quite catching. Peace. Real, genuine, uncomplicated peace with who she was and what she'd chosen. "Happy?" Dante asked, like he could read her mind. "Yes," Victoria said. "Actually genuinely happy." "Good, because you deserve to be." They drove to the village, to Rosa's restaurant where family and chosen family waited. And for the first time in her entire life, Victoria Hale wasn't performing happiness or pretending to be content or convincing herself that good enough was actually good. She was just happy. Simply, completely, honestly happy. And that, in the end, was the only revenge that mattered. Not destroying the people who'd wronged her, but building a life so good they became irrelevant to it. She'd learned something important through all of this, something she wished she'd understood 20 years ago. You can't win by making other people lose. You can only win by choosing yourself, over and over again, until the life you're living is one you'd choose even if nobody was watching. Adrian had lost everything because he'd never valued what he had. Lila had lost everything because she'd bet on someone else's promises instead of building her own future. And Victoria had won everything because she'd finally stopped waiting for permission to want more. The real story wasn't about revenge or divorce or public humiliation. It was about a woman who'd spent 41 years being who everyone expected and then woke up one day and decided to be herself instead. Everything else, the gala, the confrontation, the legal battles, even Dante, was just what happened when you finally stopped performing and started living. And living, Victoria had discovered, was so much better than any performance could ever be.